taken away a lot of his lead with black voters, but he still has a comfortable lead there. He does not with Latinos anymore, not with young people, not with progressives, not with almost anyone except black voters. So he's going to seek solace there, right? And then, but the second thing that it does is it gives him that identity politics shield. Oh, are you saying you're against black voters? Oh, are you saying you're against the Congressional Black Caucus? And that's why he's using that as a trick. And leaders like Hakeem Jeffries are happy to help him do that because they're cowards and don't want to take necessary steps to win. Plus, he doesn't really care about winning. He just cares about maintaining his own power, and that is connected in some ways to Joe Biden.
I mean, how do you maintain your power when you're about to lose a general election? I mean,
Change my mind.
By the way, I mean, the George Stephanopoulos interview also made it abundantly clear that Biden is in denial about how he's performing in the polls.
And by the way, one of the reasons that he's in denial is because Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and others won't go to the White House and go, brother, you gotta go. This is now we're in landslide territory. You're losing.
You gotta go.
States. Now we're worried you're going to lose Minnesota, New Mexico, Virginia, New Hampshire.
But it'll be okay as long as he gives it his all.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to say one more thing that's important here. I invite any national Democratic politician who thinks Biden should stay in the race to come on the Young Turks and defend him. And the reason I say that, guys, is not because, oh my God, they would be a tough interview. It would. And that would be interesting. No, because literally none of these people are saying Biden's got to go, or what do you mean? He's great, I'll defend him. They're in purgatory. And so they're just sitting there being politicians with their finger in the wind. Which way is it blowing? Which way is it? Okay, we need one more poll. We need one more interview. We're so scared. We're scared of our own shadow. But also, another giant thing here, they're also scared of their own voters, because they created a Frankenstein of blue MAGA, and now blue MAGA is furious at any politician who says that Biden should step down. And just like red MAGA, this is their own creation, and now they're having to deal with it. So I put that challenge out there. I doubt any of them will take it because they know Biden is not the right candidate. That's why they won't defend him in public. Not on this show, not on any show.
Well, the Democratic Party also created another monster, right? In that they have been trading in the politics of fear for how long now? And so the main talking point that you've heard from the Democratic Party for years now is you must elect us because Trump is a huge threat to our democracy. So you have both Democratic voters and some members of the Democratic Party panicking because they have completely bought that line. But the way that the Biden the Biden campaign is acting, you would think that they don't even believe their own message about democracy being under threat. Now, I do want to go to the letter that Biden sent to, well, he made it public. He posted it on social media, on X, formerly known as Twitter. But it was a message, a clear message to the Democratic lawmakers who have been calling on him to step aside. And he writes, Biden wrote that the question of how to move forward has been well aired for over a week now. And it's time for it to end. In other words, please stop talking about this. This is making me look bad. I'd like to move on and not have to discuss it anymore. He stressed that the party has one job, which is to defeat presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump in November. Yeah, I think the party knows that, which is why there are now many people in the party asking you to step down, but he wants those calls to be silenced. He says, quote, I wouldn't be running again if I did not absolutely believe I was the best person to beat Donald Trump in 2024. I would like to believe that I look like a supermodel, okay, that I'm the most beautiful woman on the planet. But you have to be honest with yourself and accept what your weaknesses and flaws are. I do not look like a supermodel. Joe Biden is not the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. He is absolutely delusional about this.
I would have gone with a different analogy. I don't look like a supermodel.
You do.
Okay, but anyways, but I just wanted to make one quick point on that. It's a letter. The fact that it's a letter and Joe Biden not talking directly to the Congress people is already a giant clue that he's not well. Anybody could write that letter. Joe Biden didn't write that letter. His handlers wrote that letter, right? And you write a letter when you can't do it in person and you're afraid to take questions, even from Democratic congressmen.
Finally, I have one more excerpt that I wanted to read to you all. He writes, or his handlers write, we have 42 days to the Democratic convention and 119 days to the general election. Any weakening of resolve or lack of clarity about the task ahead only helps Trump and hurts us. It's time to come together, move forward as a unified party, and defeat Donald Trump. Well, I actually see this very differently. when he notes how close we are to the Democratic convention, how close we are to Election Day, all I can think about is how his
Can't afford to
obsession
play.
with maintaining power,
Damn
okay,
it.
his selfishness is literally robbing
Get him.
a better candidate
Yup.
of more time to campaign against Donald
Slam
Trump,
dunk it.
thus increasing the chances of the Democratic Party beating Donald Trump.
Oh,
Like, think about that.
it's true.
Every single day that Biden
Yup.
refuses to drop out of the race is a day that he is robbing
Yup.
from a better political candidate that would go up against Donald Trump and potentially win.
By the way, he could also, and you might have heard this in a lot of places, and I want to make sure you have the reality on it. He can also take all of the money he's already raised and give it to a super PAC. But get a load of this. The people who
He
gave
can
money to
do
Biden
that. That's true.
can then double up.
They can just
and
give
money
it
to
somewhere
the new
else.
candidate.
Yep.
So the super PAC can use
He's
it
got
on
a good.
behalf of
He's
the
got a good
candidate,
point there.
and then they could double up their money. I hate money in politics. I don't think any of these should be the rules.
Right.
But if Biden
But it's
drops
just
out,
the truth.
all those maxes are gone. They remax to the new candidate.
That's amazing.
Right.
Wow.
So it's actually a big advantage. So what you're hearing a lot of people saying, like, oh, only Kamala Harris can get that money, et cetera. She might actually be at a slight disadvantage. She might be the only person not being able to double up on those campaign contributions. So I want you to know that too. And then the final word for me goes to one of our members, because he's thinking along the same lines that I was. So this is from our website, tyt.com. If you want to sign up and be part of the show like this, tyt.com/team. We'll have the link in the description box. Loaded Ego says, Biden can't stand up to Democrats, but no one else. And I was going to say something similar. In the debate, he flops against Trump. Can't say anything about the outrageous stuff that Trump said. Trump says, oh, they're releasing people from mental institutions and bring them to the border. That's not remotely true. Just making that up. There's 1,000 things that he made up in the middle of the debate. Even on abortion, Joe Biden was terrible.
Terrible on abortion.
And could not stand up to Trump when we needed.
Terrible on abortion.
But when it's Democrats, all of a sudden Joe Biden's a lion and he's sending letters and he's doing this and how dare you? And oh yeah, are you guys racist? I'm with the Congressional Black Caucus. And he's throwing every trick there is. That's all he ever does is fight Democrats. By the way, if you don't know his entire career, his whole thing is I make deals with Republicans. So I'll fight my own party.
Right, he's the only
so-called
one who will go across the
compromise,
aisle.
and give Mitch McConnell 90% of
He's
what he
proud
wants.
of it.
That's what he's known for in the Senate.
Yep.
So here he goes
It's
again,
true.
not fighting Trump, but fighting the Democrats who are trying to beat Trump. Thanks for watching the Young Turks. I really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you got to do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.
Wish it was more. Wish it was a miner's helmet.
Apparently, a team is going to be assembled by Senator Mark Warner, incorporating a number of different Senate Democrats who have yet to be named.
Thank you,
that
TYT,
are
for the
going
next
to go
cut
to
to
the
the stream.
White
I'd like to
House
sub
and
to your
talk
channel.
Joe Biden and encourage him to drop out of the presidential race. This is something people have been
Please drop out,
wondering
Joe.
about since the debate. Are we going to have a
The Republicans will not
Nixon-style
stand you,
private
and you won't stand
conversation to tell
Trump.
him to do the right
So
thing? And according to two anonymous
please
sources,
drop out,
this
Joe.
is
We need
actually coming.
2 new
So,
people.
Warner is telling Democratic senators that Biden can no longer remain in the election in the wake of his debate performance. Warner has told others that he's deeply concerned that Biden is not able to run a campaign that could beat former President Donald Trump. Warner has not.
I'm more
confirmed
concerned that they
there's
can't
reported
stand
as
each
of
other, and
when
if
we're,
one wins
recording
now, the
this.
other will cause
But
war.
a spokesperson for Warner said, like many other people in
I'm not
Washington and
fighting
across the
other
country,
people.
Senator
I'm
Warner
not fighting
believes
other
these are critical
Americans.
days for the president's campaign, and he has made that clear to the White House. There are a number of elected Democrats that have called for Biden to step down. None of them are in the Senate, at least as of right now. But a lot of reporters have said that although they won't go on the record anonymously, these senators seem just as worried as many Democratic governors do that not only is he likely moving towards losing the race, but that it could imperil the Senate, the Democrats' chance of maintaining control of the Senate, taking control of other bodies. And so we don't know who might be on this team with Warner. And as we spoke about earlier in the show, Biden has now come out in response to this reporting, which again hadn't even been confirmed, to say that he will not under any circumstances step down take that with a massive grain of salt. But Jake, what do you make of this? They're finally getting together some of the senior politicians to put pressure.
Yeah, about time. Should have happened a long time ago. It's now been 8 days since the debacle of the debate. All the Democratic Party is doing is slipping further and further away from victory. There's only 4 months left. They're running ads. We showed it to you a couple of days ago. They're running one against Bob Casey, senator from Pennsylvania, saying, look at Biden. And then they showed decrepit Biden. And they go, how long has Bob Casey known about this? Are they all lying to you? Look at these lying Democratic senators telling you that Joe Biden's fine, as if you don't have eyes and ears. They're all insulting your intelligence. Those are incredibly effective ads. The Democratic Party will bleed out 2 to 5 points in mass, which means House is gone, Senate's gone, everything's gone. All the swing states were already gone. Now we're into 3 non-swing states. Now we got a poll saying Biden's losing in New Jersey. We're talking about a historic cave-in. So Mark Warner is saying something super obvious. Do we all want to go down with the ship? Do we want this? You know how everybody was talking about, oh, Donald Trump's going to end the Republican Party all the way back in 2016? Do you remember Bill Clinton played golf with Donald Trump and convinced him to run? Because they thought, oh, he'll screw up the Republican Party so bad. And then when he won the nomination, everybody's like, don't worry about it. All these morons on television and mainstream media and Democratic leadership. Oh, we've got this figured out. Donald Trump's definitely going to lose to Hillary Clinton, and he's just going to destroy the Republican Party. No. Not only did he not do that, he's cruising to victory right now because Democratic leadership is a bunch of incompetent liars. And they put up the weakest possible candidate we have, and now they're sticking with him.
Thanks for watching. Our audience has helped build TYT into the media giant it is today. Together, we can accomplish anything. Support our work and join us at tyt.com/team.
But the problem with the Democratic Party is that obedience has become the #1 trait of the Democratic Party. So what Mark Warner is doing is super obvious to the rest of us, but to like the Democratic Party, that's like heresy. Opposing a Democratic leader. You can't do that. It's almost like it's against their religion or something. So in reality, Joe Biden is destroying the Democratic Party. Trump isn't destroying the Republican Party. So you can believe any fairy tale you want, but numbers live in objective reality. And these numbers are showing not only is Biden going to lose, it's going to be a landslide with Trump having a mandate to destroy this government and having all of Congress. So this Mark Warner rebellion cannot come quickly enough. I saw Peter Welch in Sheldon Whitehouse a couple of days ago make some comments like, oh yeah, we're concerned. That was a very bad night. We're past concerned.
Let's
go. Push the guy out. Push the
guy
out.
Get him going.
You worried about feelings? Well, all of our feelings are going to be hurt when Donald Trump wins and easily and says, I now have a mandate from the American people to do whatever I want. And that's what Joe Biden's leading to. And it's inarguable. There is no second argument. There's just, well, we should obey.
And when or if Trump wins, guess who's going to get blamed? Progressives, right?
And voters and young people,
voters and
black and brown people.
All of us,
like the losers that they are. That's what they always do. They don't have a second plan.
And all of us are going to be treated as we're ignorant. And, you know, there's a certain kind of elitism tied to the Democratic Party leadership that sort of just assumes that we are intelligent enough to know that Biden is better than Trump even without making any case for such, or that somehow this person who's clearly not well is well. We're just supposed to believe that. And it's just, it insults our intelligence. This shaming and insulting our intelligence as voters is not something, it's not good to treat other people like they're dumb or that they are worthy of shame when you're the one telling other people how to think and how to feel. And, you know, the down ballot implications of all of this are massive. So, you know, Mark Warner is using common sense. He, in policy, you know, senses is not particularly different than Biden. I've actually worked on tech policy stuff with some of his staff. Usually they just blame China for everything when it comes to tech. But it's like, it's just incredible how, and we've seen this again and again and again since 2016, how everything that the Republican Party, the RNC, Trump himself represents, has all been flipped on its head and used against the Democrats because they're so elitist. So what am I getting at here? Trump is a record liar. He lied constantly in the debate. He didn't have anything positive to say about the United States. Everything was the border and immigrants and all this sort of weird rambling, right? But it's like the liar-in-chief that is Trump, now that's going to be flipped and turned on to the Democrats because clearly people are going to be like, you were insulting our intelligence to say that this guy was mentally well enough or in health well enough to run and sustain a campaign when he clearly wasn't. So down ballot races, and here's the big question. Is this really the best the country has?
No.
Or are we talking about a corporate duopoly that has to be changed and challenged by progressives? And, and just a little reminder, because I know I worked for Sanders' campaign. I know that there was support amongst the Young Turks audience of Sanders' campaign. They would much rather, the donor class would much rather have, in my opinion, Biden or Trump than a real progressive like Bernie.
For sure, but I gotta say, guys, this is at this late stage. It's not, in my opinion, it's not about progressives versus establishment Democrats at all. So I find myself on the same side as Mark Warner, who's a very corporate conservative Democrat. I find myself on the same side as James Carville, who is oftentimes conservative Democrat. And so it's no longer left versus right within the Democratic Party. It's people who would like to win versus people who don't care about winning and care about leadership's feelings and who they should obey. So there is no argument that Joe Biden can win this election. None. So I know that that's like impossible for you to believe if you watch cable news, because they keep telling you, like, they just start saying, I wonder if Biden could lose. It's a massive lie factory. Biden was already disastrously behind before the debate. Now it's totally unrecoverable. No chance at all. He's not going to make up 16 points in a matter of 4 months. He's going down, not up. This is all absurd. But one more thing. Look, as we showed you earlier in the show, Joe Biden blamed the voters if he loses, right? So I want to ask you, if you're an average Democratic voter, do you think that this is your fault? Or do you think maybe it's Joe Biden's fault and Democratic leadership's fault for trying to placate his gigantic ego and saying, oh, I am the greatest, only I can defeat Trump. Even if I'm 81 and can't finish a sentence, it has to be me.
Me.
Now, is it that guy's fault or is it your fault?
It's that guy's fault.
What did you do? Did you somehow pick Joe Biden? Did you say, hey, oh my God, I want to put all my eggs in the 81-year-old basket? No, in every poll that was asked, 72% of Americans, now up to 80% of Americans saying, we don't think he's mentally well enough to run. That means 80% of Americans don't think his brain is working well enough. What an unbelievable bunch of pathological liars, which leads to Ramesh's point, which is that you're throwing away a giant Democratic advantage in this election. Trump is the liar. But now, every minute we stick with Biden, the label of liar is going to get stuck on the Democratic Party. Yep. And we're going to have a hell of a time.
And now we'll have nothing left.
Because our leadership is a bunch of liars. And they're lying to you, most importantly. You know how Trump, his number one target, his mark as a con man, is not us, it's MAGA voters? Same exact thing for Democratic leadership. Their target isn't MAGA, it's independents. Their mark is Democratic voters. They're like, if we could just get them to believe anything we say. Maybe if we put up a guy who's barely alive and tell them not to believe their lying eyes, and he's in the 30s and he has no chance of winning. Doesn't matter. We tell him he has a great chance of winning. Let's see how much we can lie and get away with. Those are the people who destroy the Democratic Party.
Can I say one thing? The problem also, John and Cenk, is that these Democratic voters that they keep trying to repeat this sort of denial of reality to is generally being messaged only through mainstream media, rather than where many of us, 15 under or even 16 under, get our media and get our information. And so I don't think some subset of CNN and MSNBC voters and NPR listeners who is sufficient to hold the fort down here.
Yeah, they're just going to the well, and they're like, hey, the guys that we've programmed to believe everything we say because they watch MSNBC, or we're just going to get. You can't win the election with just MSNBC viewers.
Yet there's a huge opportunity for Biden to do this maneuver, like and basically say, hey, I did my best. I love this country so much. I realize I can't do it any longer. I'm here to be a transition to the next generation, like you said, years ago. And actually, this is my hopefulness that this whole thing could be turned on its face through some political skill. And I know that maybe he's not the emblematic of it, but hopefully Mark Warner's also meeting with Jill Biden and Hunter Biden.
Well, the only person who's making the decision is the First Lady. Keep it real. So they have to somehow convince the First Lady, who I don't know how much she knows about politics, that to put her ego aside, she'd like to be president for a second term. But can you please care about the voters? Can you please care about democracy that you said was on the line? So every Democratic senator should join Mark Warner. And by the way, you should take note. Anyone who doesn't join the rebellion are the people who didn't mind losing at all and are the people who lied to you throughout this entire process. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You get to interact with us more. There's live chat, emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.
I tweet that, and then I finish the day. I wake up the next morning, and I glance at my phone. I'm seeing all these verified accounts that are, quote tweeting it and demanding a retraction and whatever. And I go, okay, this looks like it's getting some attention. I then continue about my day. Around noon, I hear from my dad that he got 100 messages from "you should have aborted your son" to "we're gonna find all of you" to whatever else. My dad has no idea what's going on. He's like, I don't know what this is, but I have 100 DMs to everything else you can imagine. And I start to get emails about, your Jewish faith, this and that, and the other thing. And so at that point, to me, I thought, this is just going
Thank
to
you, Lex Friedman, for the extra content stream. I've linked up to your channel.
And I really regret doing that. Because
this is David Pakman, Politics of Trump, Biden, Bernie, AOC, Socialism and Wokeism.
I tweet that, and then I finish the day, and I wake up the next morning, and I tweet that, and then I finish the day, and I wake up the next morning, and I glance at my phone. I'm seeing all these verified accounts that are, quote tweeting it and demanding a retraction and whatever. And I go, okay, this looks like it's getting some attention. I then continue about my day. Around noon, I hear from my dad that he got 100 messages from "you should have aborted your son" to "we're gonna find all of you" to whatever else. My dad has no idea what's going on. He's like, I don't know what this is, but I have 100 DMs to everything else you can imagine. And I start to get emails about, your Jewish faith, this and that, and the other thing. And so at that point, to me, I thought, this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And so I deleted the tweet. And I really regret doing that, because over the 48 hours that followed, yes, the attacks escalated through Candace Owens, and then at FoxNews.com, Newsmax, kind of peaking with Donald Trump Jr. And it was horrible.
The following is a conversation with David Pakman, a left-wing progressive political commentator and host of the David Pakman Show.
Never heard of him.
Continue to have many conversations on politics, prominent, insightful, and sometimes controversial figures across the political spectrum.
Fuck yeah, Lex.
David and I have been planning to speak for a long time, and I'm sure we'll speak many more times. This conversation was challenging, eye-opening, and
I
fun.
think it was.
This is the Lex Friedman Podcast.
Challenging,
Please check out our
eye-opening, and
sponsors
fun.
in the description.
That's
Now,
Lex for
dear
you.
friends, here's David Pakman. Are there interesting differences to you between terms like liberal, Democrat, left-wing, leftist,
Nope.
progressive, socialist, communist, Marxist, far left, center-left, all of these labels? Is there interesting distinction that you
No.
Yeah, there's two sets of distinction. One is if you just want to say, let's define each of these as political terms. they're all different terms. You can be a progressive ideologically, but not be a member of the Democratic Party. Many say the Democratic Party isn't even really very progressive, so
Nope.
these are certainly terms that we could define in order to have a conversation about the next thing, kind of as a precursor to the conversation. Sometimes the terms are used in order to tag someone with a certain ideology that's not really linked to policy or any particular political question, but they can be used positively or negatively to just kind of say, here is the image of this individual that I have in my mind. So like Marxist is right now very popularly being used by some on the right
Idiots.
to attack Democrats. There's very few actual Marxists, certainly not in positions of power in the United States.
I've never met one in
among the
America.
general
You're fucking
population.
stupid.
So I think it's important to distinguish, are we defining these terms because we want to compare
Or
and
do you want to
contrast
just
the
label
ideas
us
that a
and
particular
call
group
us
might bring to
something?
a discussion,
Yep.
or are we using them as
Don't know any
instruments
Marxists.
for conversation? They're terms that can be used to start a conversation or to stop it.
And the use of those terms is evolving rapidly month by month.
You ever try to be a Marxist and try to eat? Doesn't really work.
Using negative context to describe what.
I have. You don't eat. You dumpster
I
dive.
think what you're kind of grasping onto is that there's probably some set of ideas that would apply to most of those who consider themselves to be.
You do if your
left.
government's
The
Marxist.
discussion of how that term is mostly being used is not about policy ideas. You're accurately kind of identifying that. And it does seem like progressive is no longer being used as a smear, and leftist is being used as a smear more at this point.
Okay. But sometimes some of these terms are useful. Like, can we try to pick the terms that are useful, like liberal and progressive and democratic? Liberal and progressive. Is there an interesting, definable distinction between liberal and progressive?
That's maybe one of the most interesting ones. 10 years ago, liberal often meant what now we mean progressive. More recently, the progressive socialist leaning part of the political spectrum has started to use liberal to mean Joe Biden, to mean someone who is not really left enough. So liberal is very interesting because I remember talking with my audience years ago, maybe 8 years ago or something like that, where I identified I'm going to now use the term progressive more commonly to describe my own beliefs, because liberal has now been made a smear, it's being shifted into something else, and it also means more of like a center-left. So it's changed in some sense by necessity, by force, and also because the spectrum has shifted to some degree.
So the term liberal has evolved. Now liberal means some kind of embodiment of the mainstream Democratic Party, almost.
To some degree, sometimes I'm called, I'm written off by, within my space, there are all sorts of shades of gray, which I'm sure we can talk about where I am versus should be, could be, or am wrongly placed. And sometimes an attack on me is, he's just a lib, meaning I'm not left enough. I'm not progressive, socialist, wherever else you want to go. So yeah, the problem with a lot of these terms, and they're used very casually by people who call into my show, is that unless we actually define them each time, they very often mean very different things to different
each
people,
person.
and often come with an agenda attached to them.
What does lib
and
mean
so
to
I
you?
find that they often stifle meaningful conversation rather than encourage it.
Do you sense that there's a drifting of what is the threshold to be a progressive, or is there? Should we use progressive synonymously with democratic socialist?
I think we should not use it synonymously with democratic socialist, and this is where there's another linguistic confusion and a political confusion. So we'll first talk about the linguistic one. Social democracy versus democratic socialism. Very similar words in a different order, okay? The way I operate is democratic socialism is actually a form of socialism where one would seek to socialize ownership of the means of production, as an example. Social democracy is a very highly regulated form of capitalism, the likes of which we would see in Northern Europe, Denmark, etc. These are very different things. I associate progressivism in 2023 with social democracy and would consider democratic socialism a form of actual socialism that is different. We're no longer talking about a capitalist organization of society.
So transition from one to the other is a fundamental shift in how society operates then.
Absolutely. And when you talk about social democracy, you're talking about socializing a couple more things than we socialize in most modern capitalist countries. I had this conversation with Patrick Bet-David recently. Social democracy is, okay, we've socialized the military already in the United States. We've socialized some health care in the sense of like the VA and Medicaid, etc. We're talking about socializing a couple more things still in a capitalist country. Democratic socialism would be something beyond that, and as someone who is not a democratic socialist myself, I'm maybe not the best advocate for explaining exactly how that system would function, but it would have some version of socializing ownership of the means of production, businesses, etc.
So you mentioned you appeared on the PBD podcast with Patrick Bet-David. The debate was pretty intense. I should say I personally enjoyed it. I thought actually you did well, and I thought Patrick did well, and it was a good conversation. There was a little bit of tension.
Yeah.
And I thought that Patrick actually, so I disagreed with the internet. I thought Patrick just took on a kind of devil's advocate, like he was purposely being stubborn to bring out the best in you. But the internet thought that he's being stubborn, not being open to your ideas. I thought the tension between ideas, I think a lot of the tension had to do probably with Donald Trump and Trump supporters.
That certainly could be the case, and people wrote to me the full gamut of everything you can imagine, from this was your best thing you've ever done in public to you got humiliated and your mother should have aborted you. Okay, so everything in between. So take your pick. But the most interesting feedback I got was from people who asked me after, was it incredibly tense and awkward and because it seemed so combative. And I think I'm so used to those types of tensions in the discussions that I have that it's very comfortable to me. It's not like afterwards it's
Me too. I don't give a fuck
grudge or
about
it's
that.
tense or whatever the case may be.
No.
I'm very comfortable just I
Calling
disagree
you a
with people,
cocksucker
and
to your
that's it.
fucking
So
face,
I did not
foreign
find
loser
anything that
shithead.
happened inappropriate. I disagreed
Yep.
with a lot of the things
I don't
you said,
care.
certainly.
Yep.
So you also spoke on Michael Knowles, I think, about the idea of what is a woman. Can you speak broadly about your conversations with people you disagree with? Some of the cases it feels like it's gone wrong.
The conversations have gone wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different things, and I'm the first to tell you that depending on who I'm talking to, I go in with a different attitude about how, quote, seriously I'm taking it, in the sense of whether I think it's going to be a deep policy discussion versus whether it's going to be more of a performance for an audience that is expecting a certain thing. And I think there's different types of shows. When I was interviewed by this guy Jesse Lee Peterson in Los Angeles, it's very different, for example, than when I'm talking to Patrick Bet-David, just to give two examples. I think the reason I stopped doing the Michael Knowles show was the number of threats I would get after the fact. That's really the reason. I was glad to engage with him to the extent that the interviews were interesting and we could organize it reasonably efficiently. But the reason I stepped away was sort of the aftermath. But I did find him to be someone who was abundantly clear about his view and where he comes from. And while I could not possibly disagree more with him in terms of politics and culture and our backgrounds, everything is just so different, I found it easy to engage in the conversation just because of how upfront and clear he was about what his beliefs were.
But the number of threats is too much.
Yeah, it was just too much. And this, I don't know how much you saw about this recent Twitter dust-up I was involved in that peaked with Donald Trump Jr. tweeting about me and then declining from there.
Oh, let's talk through it. I didn't see it.
Okay.
I have to understand, the way you study Shakespeare, I have to study your Twitter.
Right.
I have to understand somewhat how much of it's sarcasm.
It's mostly sarcasm. I mean, here's the thing, and I know that there are people who will say, David, you're dealing with such serious issues, it's really not okay.
The fuck is that? The hell is that? fucking 747 was like downshifting above my house. They were like really hitting the air brakes right above my house. It tripped me out. I was like, what the hell is that sound? And it was like, I thought it was like a UFO or something crazy, but it was just a 747.
Not to take everything you do completely seriously. But my view is, it's so incredible that I've, between chance and timing and so different things, fallen into a position where this is what I do professionally. And it's a career, and it's financially sustainable, and all these different things. I don't want to end up taking myself too seriously, because I recognize the timing and luck and all of these other things, and this could have gone a completely different way. So my approach to a lot of this is, let's not take ourselves too seriously, and in particular on Twitter, a platform that, you know, the degree to which it should be taken very seriously maybe has changed over time. I'm always sort of thinking a little bit tongue-in-cheek on Twitter.
But what happened with Donald Trump Jr.?
So,
Or the full arc of it?
yeah, give you a 1 minute arc, and then we can pick whichever parts we want. After a mass shooting, now you might say there's like 2 or 3 a day. You're correct. After the Nashville mass shooting at a Christian school, I tweeted snarkily, tongue-in-cheek, to point that thoughts and prayers not only aren't particularly useful after a shooting, they also don't prevent shootings. That there's some confusion about how there would be a shooting at a Christian school, given that it is a place where prayer is taking place. I think I jokingly said something like, were they not praying enough or correctly?
In my deep journalistic integrity,
You have it.
I have your
Beautiful.
tweet.
Beautiful.
This is the only display of journalistic integrity I will show today. Okay, and I have a couple of responses.
Beautiful.
And you deleted the tweet since then,
Which I regret.
Oh, interesting.
And we can talk about that.
Well, I would love to, because it's such a
Yeah.
interesting decision. Because when you tweet something, one of the things I've also learned is you don't often understand how it's going to be read. It's going to be analyzed, like I mentioned, Shakespeare. Like
Yes.
there's the use of certain words that you regret saying in a certain kind of way, maybe just because it wasn't as eloquent, as powerful, it didn't actually convey the thing, or it's a distraction to the main message, all that kind of stuff. Okay, the actual tweet is very surprising that there would be a mass shooting at a Christian school, given that lack of prayer is often blamed for these horrible events. Is it possible they weren't praying enough or correctly, despite being a Christian school? And a lot of people retweeted that, which I'm assuming was criticism. So Colin Wright wrote, I used to consider you a reasonable progressive, but you clearly devolved into partisan hackery. I'm an atheist. It cannot begin to fathom using the murder of children and adults at a Christian school as an opportunity to dunk on the concept of prayer. And you responded, I'm dunking on the people who send thoughts and prayers and do nothing else. The shootings continue.
Yup.
I'm sure there's a lot of other interactions.
There's a few other 100,000
interactions.
So you want the arc leading to
Yes,
the
please.
deleting?
Sorry.
So
I just
basically,
wanted to display.
do you know what time of day I tweeted the original one? I feel like it was in the afternoon or evening on a Monday.
3:42 p.m. on March 27th.
Which was a Monday. Okay.
Monday.
So basically, I tweet that, and then I finished the day, and
So you tweet, and then you go on with your day.
I might have looked once at Twitter, and it had 2,000 likes and a few people saying, this might have missed the mark, but it's sort of like it's one of my 20,000 tweets. I don't know. I wake up the next morning. My baby daughter did not sleep till 7:30 the way I would like, so she's up at 6 a.m. and I get up, and I'm just there starting to make breakfast, and I glance at my phone, and I'm starting to. This was when verified meant a different thing than it means now. I'm seeing all these verified accounts that are, quote tweeting it and demanding a retraction and whatever, and I go, okay, this looks like it's getting some attention. I then continue about my day. Around noon, I hear from my dad that he got 100 messages from "you should have aborted your son" to "we're gonna find all of you" to whatever else. My dad has no idea what's going on. He's like, I don't know what this is, but I have 100 DMs to everything else you can imagine. And I start to get emails about, your Jewish faith, this and that and the other thing. And so at that point, to me, I thought, this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And so I deleted the tweet. And I really regret doing that, because over the 48 hours that followed, yes, the attacks escalated. It went through Candace Owens, and then at FoxNews.com, Newsmax, kind of peaking with Donald
And
Trump.
they're like, oh, and he deleted the
And it
tweet.
was horrible. I mean,
Like,
thousands
I
and
don't want
thousands
anybody
of people.
offended. Is that bad that I deleted the
once
tweet?
I told my audience about what happened, I got thousands of messages from people saying, David, only someone who doesn't know you and is determined to interpret this in the worst possible faith would think you're blaming kids who died for getting shot. Of course you weren't doing that. I wish you hadn't deleted it so that it would still be up and you would now see the tide kind of turning on it. This was not a fun 3 days, regardless, but I do regret having deleted it because it was a
People, the
I
people
wanted
were
to
like,
do the quickest
"Oh,
thing I
you
thought I
deleted
could
it."
to get
I
people
did.
to stop
It
trying
offended
to
people.
find
It's my
family
business.
members and send
I've
them
always
back.
ghosted.
And so
I've
around
always
noon,
ghosted.
that's what I
If
did,
it bothers
and
anybody, I
took the
immediately
people
delete it.
stop
It is
anyway.
not my
I took the
intention to
screenshot
piss
of it,
anybody off.
And I do wish I
I
had.
want to make waves. I don't want to fucking
Is
piss
there
anybody
some
off. That's not
degree-
my fucking vibe.
Maybe stepping outside yourself, that you regret tweeting that, and that it feeds the mockery engine. That
You know, like when I say fuck Trump and
So,
fuck Joe
does that
in the
tweet
same
really
sentence.
represent what you-
Fine, then I'll delete it after I type
absolutely
it.
represents the disgust with a politics that includes saying we can't touch guns. We can't. But we're willing to point to mental health or say we need more prayer in schools or whatever. 1000% it represents that view. Is it the type of snark and sarcasm that I would use if given an hour to discuss the topic rather than whatever the number of characters is now on Twitter? No, definitely not. And so I am very cognizant of the fact that it was unnecessarily provocative how it was written.
I think I asked a similar question to Ben Shapiro. Do you worry that this style of presentation can turn you from being, a deeply thoughtful, objective political thinker to somebody who is just a partisan hack or partisan, what's a good word, talking head?
Do you mean with regard to Twitter or the format of my show in general?
Well, so Twitter for now. Let's start with Twitter for now. And can you silo your style of communication on Twitter from being a virus that affects your mind?
Right. I don't have deep thoughts about the Twitter component beyond, I think, across all sorts of disciplines. This is not the best way to most effectively solve problems and figure out solutions to complex issues.
You're talking about Twitter.
Right now I'm talking about Twitter. That being said, I think all of us, to some
Oh,
degree,
yes.
have to adapt our content to the platform that we're using. In the same way that what I post to YouTube is different than what I post to TikTok, what I post to Twitter is also different. Do I think Twitter has been an unmitigated good for society? No. Have I chosen to step into Twitter as one of the ways in which I get my message out, with the good and the bad? Yes. And I think that there is a deep conversation to be had there. I think zooming out a little bit in terms of what I do, and I was hoping this would come up because I think it's really interesting. I will often get emails from people who say two things. I will get the, you would have such a bigger audience if you did X type emails. And usually they are plays to sensationalism, salacious and titillating content, more pop culture stuff, etc. On the other hand, it's folks who say, listen, what you're doing really isn't as serious as it could be, and it seems like you could do something more serious, and you should consider doing deep dives, once it was do a deep dive into Calvin Coolidge, and I was like, nobody will watch that. So it's not by accident that the show is the way it is, right? In an hour, I'm thinking of all the platforms I'm on, and I'm thinking, okay, I want to do a relatively deep dive on federal budget, and I want to talk about some of the political tomfoolery going on within the post office, and I'm going to do a segment about the wacky rally where Trump said crazy things and made up 3 words and said he endorsed the candidate whose name, right? I'm crafting that in total to find a balance between let's build this audience as much as I can in order to have a bigger base to get my message out there, and include the more serious stuff with the hope that there's a little bit of something for everyone, and I'm finding a balance between those two sides of the spectrum. It's a deliberate thing, and I'm aware that if I were producing my show 50 years ago, the balance would probably be different, and it would probably change again. If the show was audio only, rather than having all these video platforms, it would also be different. But it's a decision that's proactively made to try to get the best and most out of the hour that I'm creating every day.
But it just feels like there's an entire machine, like by Twitter and journalism, that wants to divide people, and the drama of that division, highlighting the partisan division. The drama of that division feels like it's a tension with objective, clear thinking sometimes. And so I worry that there's a drug to it. There's too much fun to mock ridiculous people on the other side.
I think you're right about that. And the fact that that is true, to me, supports... I've talked with my audience about, like the old food pyramid, which I guess was like wrong, but let's imagine that there was a pyramid that made sense.
What's at the bottom, bread?
I think like whole grains, maybe? I don't remember. It's been a
Yeah,
while since
it's whole grains, yeah.
junk food is at the very top. I'm very open with my audience. The vast majority of what I do is the top of that pyramid. And I tell people very openly, I don't consume a lot of the type of content I produce. And I think it's really important to, as a base, be doing critical thinking, epistemology, how do we believe the things we believe, basics about the world. After that, reading history, economics, philosophy, etc. After that, now we're getting into current events. I would mostly be looking at consuming primary source reporting, things like Associated Press, whatever. I know everybody will have a different list of what counts there. After that is when I say indulge in some of the commentary type stuff that I do. If you find that I'm thoughtful enough to make it into that. But I'm very open, and really what I try to do on my show often is, in being that at the top of the pyramid, tell people there's all this other stuff that should be forming your foundation that I hope you're consuming in addition to just watching me. And I'm very open with my audience about that.
What about the dynamics, the characteristics of your audience? Is there some degree to which you're, through mocking maybe Republicans, that there's a lean to that audience, and then you become captured by the audience? Do you worry about the audience?
I worry about it. I'm relatively comfortable that it's not shaping the program to a great degree, in the sense that at this point I have a pretty good sense of the things I can say that will upset what I might call my core audience. One of the interesting things, just to briefly go back to the Twitter thing, was those people who were furious with me on Twitter, and they contacted my advertisers, and some advertisers dropped me, and on and on and on. None of them are actually in my audience. None of them are regular consumers of my audience. They were kind of weaponized against me by people who said, hey, look at this. The people who follow Candace Owens on Twitter, other than for their kind of shock value, they're not in my audience. And with my core audience, I know there are things I can talk about that will generate displeasure, I guess you could say, with my audience. Sometimes when I touch the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that will happen. Sometimes on vaccine. There's a portion of my audience that is more generally skeptical of vaccines. Sometimes on some foreign policy issues. Or, I'm not a big fan of Marianne Williamson nor Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s challenges to Joe Biden. Not because I love Joe Biden, but because I don't consider them to be the most serious challengers. I know there's people in my audience who don't like that. They get mad at me about that. And I'm totally okay with that, and that tension with my core audience. So in that sense, I don't feel as though I've had that audience capture take place. But I know it can happen, and I'm very open to being told ways in which it may be happening without me noticing.
So I've made a call for questions on Reddit for this conversation. there's a lot of good questions that I'll probably bring up, but one of them was about Marianne Williamson, asking why David thinks she's a garbage candidate, which of course
I've never said.
but perhaps you have more eloquently criticized him. So let's go there.
Now
Just
that's
to
a
the
player
2024
base.
election.
Okay.
So Biden,
I
Joe
think.
Biden officially announced that he's running again.
No, players
Donald
can't
Trump
make stuff like
officially
that.
announced that he's running again. If that's the matchup, who do you think wins?
If the election's held today, I think Biden.
Why?
Well, first of all, I believe he won last time. And if I start with the results from 2020 and I think to myself, what has happened since then that would push or pull voters one way or the other, I have a hard time making a case
Yep.
that Trump is in a better position today than he was in November of 2020. So that's kind of my starting point, which is it's a rematch of an election with a known outcome.
Red card.
What has changed? And I can't make a case for circumstances having changed in Trump's favor. To give a couple of state level examples, Florida seems to be kind of moving more to the Republican side since 2020, but Trump won that state already in 2020, so it didn't really change the outcome. Arizona was close. I think Arizona has moved to the left since 2020, so I don't see Trump taking that one. Wisconsin, I think the same sort of thing applies. So being very practical, that would be kind of the start of my reasoning.
Do you think Joe Biden is a better candidate now than he was?
I think he's a worse candidate. This is going to sound ageist, but I think he's a worse candidate in that he's even older, and there already seems to be an appetite for younger candidates, particularly on the Democratic voting side. So he's going to be 4 years older.
Nobody expects
That
Republicans to be
could a
young.
liability.
Nobody.
However, he also is going to have 4 years of accomplishments. Now, you might not like the things he's done, in which case that would hurt him. But he has started to accumulate a not insignificant number of accomplishments. Some of the big things that are known, Inflation Reduction Act and the COVID stimulus, but also less well-known things like a bunch of little tweaks to healthcare, a bunch of little tweaks to student lending. There's been a lot of little things. At the macro level, I don't actually think Joe Biden has that much to do with this, the same way I didn't credit or attack Trump for a lot of the macroeconomic stuff, but inflation has started to come down significantly. The stock market's quite steady.
Bullshit.
Yeah,
How old
these
is
sort of
this?
things. I think looking historically, it's
1
a
year
pretty
ago.
okay
Inflation has not gone
environment for
down.
Joe Biden, with the exception that he was already the oldest president
Maybe that
to be
week.
inaugurated in 2021, and he would beat his own record in January of 2025. And I just don't know how voters are going to see that.
So in terms of just a public human being, how would you compare Trump and Biden? So if I were to give criticism towards Trump, it would be that he's chaotic, maybe to the point of being disrespectful to a lot of different groups, to a lot of different ideas, to a lot of different nations and leaders and all that kind of stuff. And then the criticism towards Biden would be that he, maybe perhaps because of age or any other kind of cognitive capabilities, is not really there mentally as in the way that perhaps you could say like Barack Obama was there, just mentally being able to handle all kinds of aspects of being a public representative of a nation to the world and to the people of that nation. So which in the competition of personality flaws, which do you think is more powerful?
You've laid out fair and I believe accurate assessments of elements of both of those men.
Yeah.
You haven't weighed in on to what degree you value each of those assessments, which is where I think the kind of meat of this question really is. I don't see, and I know that Biden's going to get us into World War III. That doesn't seem to be happening. I don't see the Biden deficits you listed, which I agree with you on. I don't see them as dangerous or threatening to the standing of the United States in this kind of environment with our traditional Western allies and geopolitics, etc., in the way that the sort of unhinged personality of Trump combined with his lack of knowledge about most issues is a threat. So for me, if those two are the candidates, Biden would be my choice. Now, are there people I would rather see on the Democratic side? Yes. If I knew the president would be a Republican, can I think of better options than Trump? Absolutely. You know, it's so funny. When in 2012 it was Obama versus Romney, the difference seemed so significant between them. Thinking back, I'm sure I would disagree with Mitt Romney about tax rates, and his views on LGBT are, I'm sure, I know are different than mine, but it seems, without looking at it with rose-colored glasses, it's so comparatively benign, given the 4 years of Trump. So that's kind of where I come from.
Even McCain and Obama, the differences seem quite drastic.
Yeah. McCain was interesting because Palin, as his running mate, opened the door to the sort of cartoonish stuff that we've started to see on the Republican side. Palin, Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, it started going in that direction, which has made the party a bit of a joke. Aside from what you believe the tax rate would be, right? You can say taxes are too high, but Jewish space lasers, come on, you know? So, but I agree with you on McCain also.
So, go back to the political terms we talked about. Where in that spectrum do you place yourself today? Which of the label do you think captures your political views?
Progressive social democrat, which again is a capitalist. I own my own business. I pay the taxes I'm legally required to pay, and not a penny more, and you know all those things. That's where I place myself.
Would you place yourself to the left of Joe Biden?
Yes. Yes.
Where does the AOC fit into that?
It's a good question.
What do you think about AOC as a candidate? Do you think she eventually runs?
I think that if she doesn't run into some kind of scandal, and I don't mean scandal in the sense of some personal anxiety, you know, but I mean some kind of major political problem. It seems that she has the
How is this
staying
still
power
standing?
to be
It's
in
weird.
American elected politics for a long time. Whether she would even want to be president versus maybe going to the Senate or being governor or whatever the case may be, I have no idea what her ambitions are in that sense. But certainly, like policy aside, she has this combination of charisma, likability to some, but also something about her personality that angers the people who don't like her in a way that only fuels her sort of presence, which I think applies to Trump as well. That I do think that she has the potential to have significant staying power in American politics. President, I don't know.
Do you think that's the future of political elections and politics in general? Is people who are able to skillfully piss off the other side, like AOC and Trump did?
I think it's an aspect of it. I think it's also understanding how to communicate policy ideas. Trump, you know, I have things I can praise Trump about if we want to get to that segment at some point. You let me know when that is. But I do think that there are some things Trump is very good at. And this is why it's very hard for me to believe that Ron DeSantis has what it takes to actually fight Trump in a national primary.
Wow.
And one of those
You
things
just
is
complimented Trump, bro.
Trump has even though he
You're a
often says
Republican
very
to
strange
me.
things that if you transcribe them, you go, "That's what language is that? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever." In the moment, the way he relates to adversaries on stage, etc., is very good in that he is very much aware of how it is going to be seen by the audience. And so that's why a lot of times it's more about, doesn't matter that a word salad came out of his mouth, how he immediately responded and related to the person. It was very good. So I think that knowing how to be good when clips are shared all the time, often out of context, is extraordinarily important. Knowing how to use social media, which every election cycle that means something different, but understanding how to use social media, very important. Those things are absolutely so important. And whether you're able to do a deep dive on
I got 3
the
blue
deficit,
cards.
it's certainly useful. But
I should take
would
I
say
should take the
that
red card
is
to the big
becoming less
city.
important in terms
to
of
see what I
figuring
can
out
get
who
there.
wants to represent us.
So just
And a blue
labeling
card.
out
I want to take blue
AOC,
card and red card to
and
big
then maybe
city.
let's throw in Bernie Sanders on that.
Yeah.
So where do you place yourself, and how do you do the layout of the land of Bernie Sanders, AOC, Joe Biden, and David Packard?
My instinct is, and I'm going to answer it, the thing that makes this tough is Bernie says he's a democratic socialist. He ran as a social democrat. He didn't run on anything that was really
Socially Democrat. No. not at
So
all.
I'm going by their public-facing platforms.
I've been listening to him for many, many years, and all the way back to the Tom Hartman show. And I think using the terms as you've been using them,
Yeah.
he has, I don't think, ever been a democratic socialist. I haven't heard him speak about socialism. I think I've heard him speak about
Socialized
social
healthcare.
programs and the value of social programs
Yeah.
throughout the history
But he's not a
of the
socialist.
United States and how they've been beneficial.
My understanding is very similar to yours, although there may be stuff from the 70s where he really was talking
We've
about
all
bona
did
fide
some
social.
shit in the 70s.
Yeah, yeah. You and I even, who weren't around, we
Yeah.
were doing stuff in the 70s.
I feel like we did, yeah.
My sense would be, Biden is like center left, and then I'm to the left of that, but maybe just inside of where AOC and Bernie are very, very similar to Bernie. I mean, I identify with a lot of Bernie's ideas. Maybe their implementation I'm more flexible on. I'll give you one example. Medicare for all. One way of trying to get health care to everybody, which Bernie's very big on, is you take the current Medicare program, you just eliminate the age limit, make it available to everybody, pay for it through taxation. Interesting. However, I'm open to other models if they get everybody health care that is good quality and affordable. Singapore has an interesting model. Germany has an interesting model. I am more agnostic about how we do it than just saying let's expand Medicare. Whether that puts me to the right of Bernie, I don't know, but I'm not like exactly right there on it has to be Medicare for all.
Yeah, that's more just flexibility
Principle.
versus dogmatism. So I don't know if that puts it to the left or to the right.
I don't either.
What do you think about you could term manipulation or the corruption in the DNC that perhaps tipped the scales against Bernie in the election? Do you think there
In
was such a thing?
2016 or 2020?
Both, I would say. In different, the dynamics there were different with Hillary Clinton and the pressure from Hillary Clinton as a candidate and so on. Yeah, what was there? Why didn't Bernie win? I guess is one would ask.
Okay. I think there's a couple things here. First, the DNC, I'm not a Democrat, just your audience may not know. I'm just a independent.
Yeah.
I mostly vote for candidates that end up being Democrats. In local elections, often there's no party designation. So, okay, I'm obviously on the left. I'm not denying that, but the Democratic Party as an institution has never really been interesting.
You're still a rebel that resists belonging to any institution.
Exactly right.
Yep.
Exactly right. And whether it matters, I don't know. The DNC and the RNC really are organizations that to some degree exist to justify their own existence, because if they were no longer necessary, they would go away. And so they have to assert their value and their importance. They do this in a number of different ways, organizing the way that the nominee is chosen, the convention, working with states on everything from redistricting to whatever else the case may be, setting the order of primaries and having some involvement in how that's all going to happen, and also coordinating behind the scenes. I guess they would describe it as making sure our candidates don't get in each other's ways. We might see it and say they're picking the winner. There's nothing illegal about them being involved in picking the winner, but we might say it's not in people's interests. I think the 2020 primary was really interesting. Bernie supporter, myself, I started telling my audience after a couple primaries and even before, based on polling and different things, I see a real uphill battle here for Bernie. And it's really important. People in my audience are not the average, union worker in Michigan who is mostly working and raising a family and then goes to vote on primary day and goes to vote on election day. If you spend a lot of time on Reddit and Twitter, you're going to have an inflated sense of Bernie's popularity within the Democratic Party.
Yep.
That was my sense. And to some degree, we saw that in certain states. I don't have the exact primary order and results in front of me or in my head, but the big turning point was South Carolina. South Carolina was when Joe Biden won and won handily, understood to be because of the larger African American population in South Carolina. And right around that exact same time, I actually don't remember now whether it was the day after or the day before, some of the smaller Democratic candidates, smaller in terms of support, got out and said, I'm endorsing Joe Biden. And to some degree, of course it was all organized and timed to help Joe Biden. There's no doubt about that. This is what the DNC does. It's hard for me to be mad at the DNC because this is sort of like, if we believed they were there to be unbiased arbiters and to stay as much on the side as possible, it would make sense to be furious that they've gone against their stated, kind of mandate. But we know that the DNC negotiates and is working behind the scenes and has a favorite. That favorite was Hillary in 2016, 2020. So I share the frustration about the power that the DNC has, but for people who were saying they did something illegal or whatever else the case may be, that doesn't seem to be the case.
I think it's called bribery.
But this is part of why
I think it's
I would
backroom
love there not
trading.
to be this
They
big
offered
group
him
of
something.
Republicans and Democrats, and there's probably 4 major changes that have to happen in order to make that a reality. But I share the frustration of folks while recognizing that Reddit was not accurately representing Bernie's level of popularity.
Still, I wish that the bias wasn't towards the what could be negatively termed the deep state, towards the bureaucracy, towards the momentum of the past, which I think Joe Biden kind of represents, versus new ideas. Which is funny to say that Bernie Sanders somehow represents new ideas because he's also an older gentleman.
Well, it's a lot of framing. And the other aspect to that is, on paper, Joe Biden's platform was arguably the most progressive of any Democratic candidate who won the nomination. Now, of course, there were people who challenged the nominations who were to Joe Biden's left. A lot of this is perspective, and that's how you end up saying the guy who's a couple years older than Biden is actually the guy with a fresh perspective, which is interesting because I don't disagree with him.
Yeah, and then you also have to say the perspective doesn't always align with the policies. You're right, and the actual policies of Joe Biden are different than maybe the perception of Joe Biden.
Or what he ran on. I mean, just 2 examples I would give are, during his campaign, he played up a little bit his interest in doing student loan forgiveness and something on cannabis. I never bought it. I told my audience, I think he's saying this stuff because this is the way the tide is kind of, the wind is blowing and he's being advised to say this stuff. I don't think he's going to do very much on either of these things. He did actually do some student loan stuff, but
He did.
that would be 2 examples.
Okay, let's go to the something you alluded to.
I love this student loan stuff. He forgave my student loans. Like, it's one of the reasons why
Well, what to
I would
you
still
is
vote
a
for him.
critic of Trump?
Is
What
he
to
seemed like he
you
at least did a few
are,
things good.
The pros, the strengths.
What did Trump do?
Donald
Spend
Trump,
money.
And what to you are his biggest weaknesses?
The strengths of Trump, see how I can frame them in a way that is
The
both
conservative
accurate
spends
and
too much money.
accurately assesses my feeling about it.
And can be taken out of context most masterfully through the clipping process.
Yes, Trump's strengths are mostly superficial and in terms of presentation. Trump was able to, I call it a grift. Some
Yes.
on the right say he's just so good at relating to different types of people. Trump, as a rich guy from New York City, was able to convince people that he spent most of his life trying to be kept isolated from, that he had their best interests in mind, that he knew why they weren't doing well.
Yeah,
in the
right.
2016
That motherfucker gets his
economy,
ass fucking.
and that
He,
had
he
solutions
gets his
that he was
ass
going to do.
literally wiped by
The truth
another
is,
human being.
He never really liked those people, and as soon as they
That
weren't
motherfucker
useful
does
to
not
him
wipe
for a
his own
period of
ass.
time,
Never has his own
yeah,
life.
that
He's had
love
aides
affair
and
with
servants his
followers
whole
stopped,
life.
and then now it's
That
back to
motherfucker is
him
so
again.
separate from these piece of
didn't
shit
really
right wing.
understand.
That. Ooh, the fuck was that? Was that me? Oh, I guess I jumped again. That was me, right? Yeah, that was me. So yeah, that motherfucker's had like servants since he was a baby. They check his fucking temperature every morning. Every meal is completely balanced and fiber balanced and stuff. This guy does not represent any little Eichmann in the lower middle class. He only represents big Eichmanns in the upper class. He doesn't represent little Eichmanns in the lower class. Trust me, he really doesn't. You guys think he does? No, he hates kids. Well, I have enough wood now to keep going on the protection. We'll keep going, but I will not invest big, and I want to put this jackhammer away because I don't care about losing this other stuff. I care about losing this jackhammer, and I'm not using it right now, so I'm just going to put it away. Goodbye. Before I do anything else, I want you to pull, make me another pick. Was that the bear that I heard, or a horse? Now I feel like I've heard some sounds. And I'm putting it all away to go upstairs and just scan around, because I now believe I've heard like a horse and evidence of a human being. So we're just going up there. Lose a bow. Maybe I'm tripping. Oh, shit. Congrats on the bow, Dr. Game. Good fight, buddy. Welcome to Zombie Server, yo. Oh, thank you. I won't kill you or anything. Better to make friends here than enemies, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Thank you. All the scrap, huh? Oh, well, thank you for the gift, sir. Hey, I'll look out for you and I'll pick you up if I knock you, okay? Nice to meet you. He stole my shirt. That's funny. Did you? Oh, I paused it.
causes
God, go.
of the problem that
Go.
those folks were experiencing, and his solutions were laughable, right? Like Jared was going to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in year one. He was going to replace Obamacare in 2017. Yeah, things that were never going anywhere. But what he did really well was he put up a united front of, I know what is ailing you.
I will fix it.
I know how to fix it.
Yep.
And I know how to fix it, I guess, because he's a businessman and he's been above the fray of politics for so long, knowing how to use political donations to his advantage. He called that smart, etc. I think that's his greatest strength.
Why do you say that the Jared plan for Israel and Palestine and the plan for healthcare to improve Obamacare, why do you say that's laughable?
Well, only someone, I would include the North Korea plan as well, which I'd love to talk about. Only someone who doesn't know anything about the size and scope of these issues could so arrogantly say that they could solve them in that way and on that time frame. I'm all for optimism and bringing a new face to thing, absolutely, without a doubt. But, you know, a wall with Mexico that Mexico will pay for at the end of my first term. I know there are people who believed it because they would call into my show and say, I'm voting for Trump because of it. But it's hard to believe that anybody serious would fall for that unless you were deliberately wanting to just believe whatever was being fed to you, or you just hadn't ever thought about these issues before. The healthcare plan, you know, in 2017 they proposed one, would have led to 24 million or so people ending up without healthcare. It didn't go anywhere because it was so terrible. And then in August of 2020, Trump said, in 2 weeks, I'm going to finally have my healthcare proposal. It's 2023. We still never got it. You know, with all of these things going through, it was just sort of arrogance. And I get the perspective of, I want optimism, and I liked that optimism. It worked. I mean, fair. A lot of people saw it and liked it. As someone who followed a lot of those issues closely, they seemed, of course, like impossible promises.
Well, it's a double-edged sword. So to push back a little bit, if we look at the things I have a little bit more knowledge about, which is the space of artificial intelligence, there's a company called DeepMind, and there's a company called OpenAI that were laughed at for a long time when they were talking about that they're going to solve intelligence. And now they've made, especially DeepMind, and now most recently OpenAI with GPT, they've made progress that most of the AI community would not have imagined they'd be able to make. Everything from AlphaGo beating the World Go champion, just all the different steps and progress that it can get into were a surprise to everybody, and they are legitimately fearlessly pursuing the task of solving intelligence. The other aspect, he gets a lot of criticism now, but another example is Elon Musk. I can say a lot of things like SpaceX, so commercial space flight. He was laughed at for a long time.
I'm not laughing at him for that. I've never been critical of him for that.
Tesla,
I think him being a private member is kind of laughable. I've never been critical of him doing that. I'm okay with that.
And I, as a person that I believe objectively can look at the progress of autopilot as a semi-autonomous vehicle system, has been incredibly surprising. So the reason I mention that is sometimes it feels like you need the guy or the gal who makes those preposterous, ambitious statements like, we're going to solve healthcare this year. Like, and then there's experts like yourself that are thinking, have you read anything about the history of it? Israel-Palestine is a good example of that. Do you know there's a history there? Do you realize how complicated, how many people have tried, how many people have failed, how many millions of people hate each other in this little place, in this land?
I won.
Like, sometimes the expertise can really
yes,
out.
Caldari
So
Navy
to
Hook
push back,
Bill. Oh wait,
sometimes you
no,
have to have
it was a cheap
the-
bet. Oh, it
almost
was.
be naive
Well, I
and
won.
stupid
Cool.
and
I
just
won a
rush
10 million
in
bet. Sure.
with an
Caldari
optimism
Navy.
in order
Sweet.
to actually make some progress.
I thought it was something big. I was like, ooh, anything I want is going to get me a lot of money. It did. It was 10 times the value of what I bet.
Technology space.
Not politics, yes.
Not from politics, which, I mean, listen,
Yeah.
I would love to be able to make headway on some of these issues more quickly, without a doubt. I do think at some point, though, when it comes down to voting and saying, one of these people is going to be ostensibly in
You
charge
are
for 4
not-
years through all of the departments and secretaries and choices that they make. We do want to apply
Yes.
some level of realism
Load it.
with
God
the
damn it,
with the
you're
understanding that your examples are from the tech space, and they're good examples. There's no question about it. One thing I'll add to this: I recently read Bradley Hope's new book about North Korea, and it's really about an activist who doesn't even really matter. But in the background of the book, it's written. Much of what is written about happens during the Trump era, and when Trump did the first and then the second, I guess you'd call them summits with Kim Jong-un. And it actually did seem like, to some degree, Trump's "we're going to handle this like I do a business deal" approach to Kim Jong-un. In some
Oh, did
sense,
Almost Human launch?
It actually was logical because of Kim Jong-un and the way that it was so ego-driven, and they both, as sort of authoritarian strongmen types to different degrees, wanted that. There was actually a kernel where I actually thought, as I read it, Trump's initial idea wasn't crazy. The problem was he knew nothing about the backstory of the relationship. He fell for all sorts of lies from Kim
Oh, it's the
Jong-un.
10th
and
now?
He made offers that didn't make
so
any
it's
sense to
tomorrow.
me. It
Sure.
fell apart, fine. But that's an example where I think Trump's personality was not actually, at its base, the problem when it came to North Korea.
But there's other things of this nature that could go in, or some people argue goes into the strengths and pros of Donald Trump. For China, for example, tariffs on China. Can you make
Very
the case that
weak.
there's some
Set us
positive
back
outcome?
thousands of years. Fucked us up with China. Totally fucking fucked up China.
And
Fucked
I'll
up
give you-
China so
Okay, there's
bad.
also cons.
I'll give you.
He
it's
set
tough
us
to make-
back.
So
There's
the
no
China thing
there's
is
no
really-
pros.
So just
There's no pros with Trump and
very
China.
recently to when we're recording this,
None.
Trump was on Fox News interviewed by a guy named Mark.
None.
Levin, and Trump proposed a new, I call it a conspiracy theory, maybe it will strike you as something different, about China, COVID, and tariffs. And Trump's suggestion was that the tariffs cost China so much money, China sent the US so much money in tariffs, that they released COVID as punishment. Now there's a couple problems with that. One, American companies pay the tariffs. Trump still doesn't seem to know this. Trump seems to believe that when he puts a tariff on Chinese
True, I didn't think about it
imports,
that way, but yeah.
someone in
True.
China is cutting a check to the United States. American companies buy the stuff from China, and then American companies cut a check to the United States for the tariff. Trump doesn't seem to get that.
But it still has sting to the Chinese economy.
You can make the argument that if there is a suitable alternative domestically or from a different country, that it will reduce imports, but it didn't happen. And we actually have reports now that the tariffs on China cost about 250,000 American jobs. The other problem with that idea is China created and released a virus in order to hurt
The
you.
China virus.
But as of today, 5.7 of the 6.8 million deaths were in other countries. It's a very indirect way. You're mostly killing people in other countries to hurt Trump.
Which is
Maybe
what they
there was a-
always do.
This is the sort of thing where, when I think about how Trump dealt with China, it's very scary. Because given another 4 years, who knows what he might do if he still doesn't understand how tariffs work.
But geopolitics operates in complicated ways with carrots and sticks, and Henry Kissinger has written quite a lot about this. And
God
in
damn
some
it.
sense, the positive aspect here that Donald Trump is willing to take big risks in the
Yeah,
game
for
of
money.
geopolitics
Yeah, for
with
selling
this,
us out to the
giant
highest foreign
superpower
bidder
that
for
is
money.
China.
Yeah,
And a lot of
the
others
power.
are too afraid
I would say.
to call them out.
Am I wrong?
to
Am I wrong
come to
here?
the table and
I
criticize.
think he'd tell you that himself.
I
If you asked
certainly
him.
think that's an argument.
I don't think he'd do that
can
in front of
be
a
made.
camera, but if you were to
My
ask
question
him
would
privately
be,
if
what tangible
why he was doing
positive
all this, he would
outcomes
say
did
money
it
and
lead to?
power,
And
I'd
it's
say.
tough to identify any, but I think
Or at least
it's a great thing.
let's
I mean,
hope
listen,
he would be that honest.
one of the things you're
I
kind
don't
of
think he
getting
is.
at, maybe indirectly, is that there's been this sense that politics has been done very similarly for a long time, and even between Democrats and Republicans, still, even with some policy differences, there's still the kind of feeling that it's disconnected folks in DC mostly dealing with issues that don't directly affect. Look, I get that. I'm with you on that. I think the question as to whether Trump's bluster was positive rather than extraordinarily humiliating in many ways, I just come down on it was an absolute and total humiliation. But I understand that you can recognize Trump doesn't know a lot of stuff, but his attitude was refreshing in some way. That's a reasonable position for someone to take. I disagree with it, but I understand it.
Well, is trying and failing better than not trying?
This goes well beyond politics. You know, Wayne Gretzky has weighed in about this. Michael Jordan has weighed in about. I mean,
No,
this is,
it's better to
is
take
it better
the
to have
shot.
tried and failed than never? Is it better to have loved and lost than
Yes.
never to have loved? I don't know. I mean, listen, we lived.
It's
through
better
4
to
years of
take.
Trump.
It's better
We
to take
know
the shot.
what that 4-year term was
like. Yep,
and it's very hard for me to say that the things he tried
we're good.
were overwhelmingly reasonable. But I get the point you're trying to make, and I appreciate it. And it's if we don't do any of it, then where do we end up? Sure, we know where we ended up with Trump, and it was pretty embarrassing.
I would say I could
was
like
there,
him based off the fact he
some more
tried.
strengths?
I think he
We didn't
tried.
start any new wars.
You'd have to be mad to
So
want to be
something
president.
to that.
Yeah, it's
I think he
interesting.
tried.
There's a few different approaches to dealing with that. First, it's really important.
That's about the
to
nicest thing
remember
I could say about him.
The counterpoint to that, from the folks who like to say that, was that Hillary Clinton was going to start 3 wars. Sometimes they say 4 wars. Sometimes they say 5 wars. Okay.
Yep.
The geopolitical situation during the 4 years that Trump was in office.
It's true. She wanted a
I don't
lot of
think
money
that
for
they
war.
obviously lent themselves to wars that Trump just barely was able to keep us out of. I think the Russia thing is interesting because now it's very popular to go back and say, you know, the reason Putin didn't do the Ukraine thing when Trump, right, and to somehow give Trump credit for that. There's a counterpoint to it, which is Putin under Trump, particularly if Trump got 4 more years, would have been able to maybe consolidate power in other ways because of his relationship with Trump. I'm not coming down on one side or the other. It's not my area of expertise, but it's not the open shut slam dunk that, you know, Trump likes to say it is. Putin didn't invade because he knew I would crush him. And okay, so it's not obvious to me that there were imminently wars that would have started during that time. That being said, you know, for all the criticism of Obama during Crimea, Trump seemed to just kind of forget about that after all the criticism and say, I'm not actually going to do anything about that. And so there are foreign policy criticisms that could be made, but it is true, no new wars were started under Trump. And I like that. I don't like wars.
What do you think about his handling of COVID? Can you say, what are the pros and cons of his handling of COVID?
The con for him is he'd be president right now if he had handled it differently. I think it's abundantly clear. Early on, and there's now a lot of really good reporting about the conversations he was having with Jared Kushner and others, he became convinced, either because of things he was being told or because he decided this is the way it's going to be, this is going to go away. Fine, it's in China, okay, it's in China and Italy, okay, we have 15 cases, but it'll soon be 0, we'll be open by Easter of 2020, none of it happened. If he had handled it in the following way, and I've said this to Rogan and I've said this to Patrick Bet-David, and they tend to all see my side of this. If Trump had said, listen, we don't know how bad this is going to be, but I care too much about the American people to take a shot. So it's not going to be 2 weeks. It's going to be a little bit, but I need your help. We're going to bring everybody together. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. We're going to have MAGA masks, and you could have kept 50 cents on the dollar to pay off Stormy or whoever, right? But it would have been, I think he wins re-election because the perception was, and reality is a version of that, the perception was that he was way too cavalier about it early on. People died who didn't need to die. And I think that it was arguably the one area where he could have all but guaranteed that he was going to get himself reelected.
Well, to push back on that, I mean, because you mentioned sort of masks and lockdowns kind of a solution to COVID.
I didn't mention lockdowns, but I'm glad to talk about policy.
Sure, quarantine, or like, there's several solutions to a pandemic, broadly speaking.
Sure.
And one of them is vaccine. And so you didn't mention that. He fast-tracked the development. His administration fast-tracked the development of the vaccine, which is surprising he didn't really take much credit for.
I think he tried. There's a lot there.
Well, to me, it seems like you could make the case with the Trump hand gestures that his decision for fast-tracking the development of the vaccine saved tens of millions of lives. He could, in the Trumpian way, make that case.
So, a couple different things. I know you don't necessarily follow Trump's rallies as closely as I do, and I'm jealous of you. But he did promote the vaccine stuff hugely for a while, until his audience turned against him. And then he had to draw this line where he was going, I made the vaccines, which none of you have to take, by the way. Freedom. You don't have to take them. But it's fantastic, and nobody else could have done it. But don't worry, nobody's going to make you take the vaccine. And he actually got booed at a couple of his own rallies when talking about the vaccines. But let's back up a little bit. Fast tracking. My understanding of what he did is he did what any president in his situation would do, and what many world leaders elsewhere did as well, which is he agreed to pre-purchase supply of vaccine in order to provide money to pharmaceutical companies to scale up the manufacturing, which is absolutely fine. But he wants, one of the stories he tells is, it usually takes 12 years to develop a vaccine. We did it in 9 months, thanks to me. Decades of mRNA technology being developed created the platform in which you can make a particular vaccine in 9 months. Didn't have anything to do with Trump. He did pre-fund and say, we will buy huge supply, and that provided liquidity to the pharmaceutical companies.
But he
That's
also delegated control to people, to experts that enable that kind of fast tracking of vaccines, right?
He was very eager for the FDA to approve it because he saw that there would be a political benefit.
And he didn't get in the way, I guess.
He didn't get in the way. Fair. I think now we're on the same page. He did not get in the way of vaccines being developed, which is good.
Presidents and bureaucracies have a way of getting in the way. And
I don't disagree with that. I'm not aware of really any governments that got in the way. I mean, it seemed, given the global situation, everybody, European countries were pre-purchasing vaccine. African countries who were going to be later to receive vaccines were partnering with the European countries that had pre-purchased. But the most interesting thing about all of this is Trump did play up the vaccines for a long time until his crowd didn't want to hear about it anymore, which was crazy. It was sort of like he became a victim of the monster he created to some degree.
one of the effects of all this that makes me truly sad is this division over the vaccines has created distrust in science.
Yeah.
And also, what makes me sad is the scientific leaders, Anthony Fauci being one of the representatives of that community. I would say they really dropped the ball.
In what way?
They spoke with arrogance. They spoke down to people. They spoke in a way that a great scientist does not speak, which is they spoke with certainty, without humility, like they have all the wisdom and all of us are too dumb to understand it, but they're going to be a parent that tells us exactly what to do, versus speaking to the immensity of the problem, the deep core of the problem being the uncertainty. We don't know what to do. The terrifying thing about the pandemic, we don't know anything about it as it's happening, and so you have to make decisions, you have to take risks about, well, maybe you have to overreact in order to protect the populace, but it's in the face of uncertainty that you have to do that, not empowered by science somehow, and the deep expertise that somebody like Anthony Fauci claims to have. So like I'm really troubled by the distrust in science that resulted from that, and that you have to blame the leaders to the degree. Leaders take responsibility, and I think Anthony Fauci was the scientific leader behind the American response to the pandemic, and I think he failed as a scientist, as a representative of science.
I'm less, I don't know if interested is the right word, but the Fauci review is less interesting to me in terms of what comes next than the first part you mentioned, which is the distrust in science. And sometimes I'll get voicemails or emails from people in my audience who say that I have had to backpedal on certain things related to this. And one of the things I tried to do from the beginning was not speak in certain terms when we really didn't have complete information. So there was this period where hydroxychloroquine was first sort of mentioned as a possible treatment, prophylactic or proactive treatment for COVID, or active treatment for COVID, along with a bunch of other stuff. There was ivermectin, there was vitamin D, there were all sorts of different things. And I tried to be careful to say, right now, we don't have rigorous science that tells us that some of these things work. It doesn't mean that won't come in the future. At which point, if there was something as cheap as hydroxychloroquine that treated COVID effectively, unbelievable, fantastic. It's not, there's no way it ever will be determined. We don't have that information right now, so it's not super wise right now to go and start taking this. We eventually learned, like with vitamin D, having an appropriate vitamin D level does seem to be, based on what I've most recently read, generally protective and a good thing when it comes to infections of different. Great. Okay, so that one we figured out. One of the really difficult things is that the quote truth about the vaccines did change, and the original, again, this is all, I don't pretend to be an expert, but just someone who's synthesizing the medical data and writing about it. Originally, the first vaccine related to the wild type strain did seem to be very effective, not only at preventing death and serious illness, but also transmission. There were people then saying it doesn't prevent transmission. Over time, as the variants came forward, the vaccine became less effective at that. At that point, I started telling my audience something different, because as far as I was concerned, the reality on the ground had changed. In my mind, that's how science works. It's not backpedaling, it's we're adjusting our beliefs to what is taking place in the real world.
Well, to be fair, the scientists, many of whom are my friends, virologists, biologists, they have way more humility than people like Anthony Fauci who are speaking about this, or the CEO of Pfizer who are speaking about this. This is the fundamental problem here. Is the way science works is there's usually a lot more humility and a lot more transparency about what we know and what we don't know. And people like Anthony Fauci thought it would be beneficial for the world if he speaks with more certainty. But because of the political division that formed around that certainty became completely counterproductive. That people didn't trust anything about the vaccine, didn't trust any institutions there were that contained the experts that actually knew what they were doing, and you basically didn't trust anything that was coming out of the mouths of scientists. Some large percentage of the population. So that made you completely ineffective in at scale as a society trying to respond to a pandemic. And that's where I put a lot of blame on leaders. So political leaders and scientific leaders are the ones that should inspire us to all get together and respond. And that should be the case for the pandemic. It should be the case in the time of war. This kind of stuff.
I generally
Coming
agree
party
with you.
invite.
For me, it's really about shared blame, and there were a lot of different reasons why that early communication wasn't good. Part of it was, for me, I prefer accuracy rather than overconfidence. I would prefer, listen, we don't really know right now whether masks do X or Y. What we do know is the supply is really limited of this type of mask. We're going to try to keep them for the frontline workers. I love that. That's the way I want to be communicated to. A call was made to do it differently, which was to say the masks don't actually help. But the real reason is they want to keep them for healthcare workers. And then later, the masks are what's going to solve. I'm with you 100%. I think the other layer to it is you can't ignore the political situation at the time. If Trump had won re-election and the vaccine distribution had taken place while Trump was president rather than Biden, my belief is that the same number of Democrats would have gotten vaccinated, but way more Republicans would have as well, because they were following not science, but political leaders. And when it was Biden in D.C. instead of Trump, a lot of those people said, I don't trust the vaccine. But wait, it's Trump's vaccine. Yeah, but something about the way Biden's distributed. So I do think you can't ignore that political layer. I agree with you, the communication was a disaster.
Let me ask you about Joe Biden. What are the strengths and weaknesses of Joe Biden?
Weaknesses, I think, are some of the things you've identified. He is not seen as high energy. He is not the same Joe Biden that debated Paul Ryan in 2012 and ran circles around him in just an incredible debate performance. He is not inspiring in the way that someone like a Barack Obama was to people coming up and starting to get interested in politics. I think a lot of those are fair criticisms. I think on policy, he's not interested in a lot of the things that younger voters are interested in. I mentioned cannabis reform. I mentioned student loans. So I think that's a deficit for Biden. I think the upside to Biden is when it comes to foreign policy, diplomacy, high-level negotiations, knowing how to engage with allies in a productive way, it's tough to find someone with more experience than Biden. I know that there are counterpoints to what I'm saying, and those include, that was the old Biden, the new Biden doesn't have it. That includes, that's just a sign of rot because he's been around for so long, nobody should be around that long in public. Perfectly reasonable criticisms to talk about, but I do see that as one of his strengths. And he also is good at knowing when he can work with Republicans and when he can't, and not wasting more time than is sort of expected for posturing reasons. And I think that that's a good thing.
Do you think he's actually there? So in day-to-day operational government, given his cognitive capabilities, do you think he is an active and practicing executive?
I don't know that I can say that it's because of what may be going on cognitively, but my sense from the people I talk to is that he's very much involved in the highest level geopolitical and big domestic economic stuff, but that a lot of the smaller issues that presidents might or might not be in sort of plugged into, that he's not plugged into the details of a lot of the lower level stuff.
Yeah, you could probably apply the same exact criticism, even more so towards the Donald Trump administration, in terms of being a practicing, active executive who's paying attention. Like, for example, like Vladimir Putin is somebody who loves the role of the executive, has a huge amount of meetings, is constantly tracking information about agriculture and all the different subsystems of government. Stalin, funny enough, was also extremely good at this. So certain people just love the job of being an executive. And I'm not sure if Donald Trump did.
My mother loves the job
Joe
of being
Biden in his
executive.
current
She's
state
good at
has
it.
the cognitive capability.
She schedules everything and
It's a good
everybody,
question. Kim Jong-un's
runs
another one,
everybody's
by the way. There's
lives, and
videos
is
of
happy
him,
to do it.
Examining a pottery, a factory where they make plates, and making very specific comments about how the plates should be made. I think that in that case, there's a lot of propaganda value to it. With Trump, I think you're probably right. He did get involved in the minutia of things. I mean, once he pulled out the weather map and with a Sharpie drew a different hurricane path that was more politically convenient to him. That's pretty micro, saying the Weather Channel's wrong.
I see what you did there.
This is okay.
I see what you did there.
That's micro. He went to Puerto Rico and he gave out paper towels after a hurricane. Now he was shooting them like free throws, which didn't look very good. So he will get involved in the micro when it's advantageous. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I do agree with you that he wants to just kind of make it so. Build the wall. I don't know. Just build it. Figure it out. Get it done.
Quick pause. Bathroom break?
Sure.
Yeah. You're hilarious. And just for the sake of completeness, I should mention the subreddit, what Biden has done. There's also what Trump has done, but it's not as active. And it has like this master list of all the accomplishments. I recommend people look at it. It's kind of rigorous and interesting with links, list of all the things he's done. Just to list some of them. Restored daily press briefings, canceled the Keystone Pipeline, reversed Trump's Muslim ban, required masks on federal property, rejoins the Paris Climate Agreement, extends student loan payment freeze, extend eviction freeze, historic stimulus bill, as you mentioned, ends funding for border wall, and so on and so forth. DACA, orders strengthening of DACA, rejoins the World Health Organization, and the timing of this, of course, is important. Several historic stimulus bills, which of course you could criticize. Raise the minimum wage for federal contractors and federal employees for $15. There's a lot. It makes you realize, with both Trump and Biden, that there's a bunch of small details that matter.
Yeah.
Like, that matter in people's lives, like actual little policies. Trump did a lot of stuff, as far as I heard, for the military, like not big stuff, but small stuff.
Yeah, I'm curious what you're thinking of. I mean, I know one of the big things under Trump was we're going to get trans people out of the military.
That's not what I was referring
You
to.
weren't referring to that. Trump's hilarious with these stories that he tells. And one of the stories, and you get to know them if you follow him at all. He tells the story, when I came into office, the generals came to me and they said, "Sir, the cupboards are bare. We have no bullets." And so I rebuilt the military. The cupboards were bare when Obama left it, and it was just terrible. But I rebuilt it, and the generals, I've got the best generals. They said, "Sir, it's incredible what you were able to do." You look into it, and it's like, yeah, that's not really true. Like, it is true that there are armaments that just like on a schedule do get replaced, and that's part of the military-industrial complex, but there's nothing like special Trump really did. But these stories they take on like a life of their own, and it's interesting to sometimes try to dig down and figure out, like, was there any policy connected to that, or is that just a story?
Do you think it's possible to have a good conversation with each of them, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, in a podcast context or in a debate context?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're saying like,
Both.
could I with either
Yes.
of them? Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Joe Biden too.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, can you dig into that a little more?
Well, I mean, I don't know what. I think there's maybe something implicit in your question, but
That's deeper about the nature of politics and politicians. Yes.
I think with either of them, I mean, the political differences wouldn't be an impediment to having a
Ooh.
good conversation. With
Why
either
are
of
all
them.
these here?
I think one of the things that's
Okay.
really tough in my experience when talking to elected officials is they could be super interesting about 100 different topics, but handlers decide or try to get you to talk about something you don't really care about and something really narrow, which doesn't bring out your best nor their best.
Yeah.
And that's a frustration. But I think that given an unstructured 3-hour conversation, I think it would be interesting to talk to both. I mean, listen, with Biden, aside from his view on cannabis or whatever, his background and the incredible, unimaginable family tragedy that he had in his first wife and multiple kids dying, and I mean, it's just incredible, and with Trump, I think also you could have an interesting conversation.
Yeah, they're human beings with a life story.
Yes.
And they're some of the most successful humans who have ever lived.
I thought it was
That,
weird that death defined him.
To this highest office.
He was supposed to be
in
like defined by
complex
death.
ways.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things I'm troubled by, maybe you can speak to, is why we're so negative towards presidential candidates and presidents. Why it's just they go through this shitstorm no matter who they are.
Yeah.
They're like hated. Like all the conspiracy theories and
They're just the punching bag.
just the dynamics.
I love
of how we
punching
talk
bags. I
about
punch them all the time.
It's vicious. If you just look at replies to even Barack Obama on Twitter, it's like, what is going on here? Why? Because we look at other leaders in other spaces, and we're generally positive about it.
Yeah, there's a couple different things. There's this dynamic which is really unfortunate, which is you ask people, do you approve of the job a particular president is doing? And very often, if at any point while they were in office they did something you don't like, people will say, I don't approve. And so by its nature, what that means is just like the longer you're in office, the lower your approval rating is going to be. And very often that's the way it works. I mean, there's major events like 9/11 spiked George W. Bush's approval to an incredible level, then it came back down with the Iraq War. But there's this unfortunate thing that when people are just asked, you think Biden's doing a good job? If 4 months ago Biden did something on healthcare that somebody didn't like, even if you like most of it, a lot of people from that point forward will say, I don't approve. They might still vote for him because they like him better than the alternative or whatever. It's just the dynamic of politics, and I agree it's very.
Does it have to be that way? Do you think?
I don't think it has to be that way, but to unwind it, so many things would have to change. I think our election system is part of why politics is the way it is, where you have two choices, and it's first past the post.
Elephant
and
in a
we have this
jackass.
electoral college, so that depending on which state you vote in,
Eating
kind of meaning
the
and significance
peanuts
of your vote
that the
is
parties
different. If you
have
vote in
tossed you.
Montana, it's the Republican candidate's going to win, and that changes the dynamics. I think that's part of it. I think that at a personal level, I've experienced this in my life a lot. We've become, and by we I mean people in the United States to some degree who talk about this stuff, we've become uncomfortable when there is disagreement, and it bleeds over into now we can't have a normal interpersonal relationship anymore. I'm from
Yeah.
Argentina, and in Argentina, it's really common, even in my family,
To
there
disagree
are
really
incredibly heated
immensely
political
with your
debates
family. Yep.
at the start, the middle, the end of some kind of gathering. But then everybody just goes back to like, okay, we disagree on some things, but that's
But
okay.
we still love each other.
And
We're family.
We can now go and, finish cooking the beef or whatever it is that we're doing. And I experienced this even with people who come up to me on the street and they go, just earlier today, a guy came up to me and he said, RFK all the way, baby. Talking about Bobby Kennedy Jr. And I just kind of, said, oh, all right, let's see what happens.
all right.
And then there was another moment where the guy ended up standing next to me for maybe longer than he thought, and I could tell this guy's getting so awkward because it was an utterance he thought that would just be on the fly and he'd be gone, but now we're standing next to each other waiting for the sandwiches. It's like no big deal, it's okay, you like Bobby Kennedy Jr. I don't plan to.
I don't care
It's
about that.
And that's like a socio-cultural thing. I think there's lots of other countries. I've spent time in Italy. I have relatives in Israel where like shouting at each other is sort of like normal, and then you just go back and finish the. It sounds like shouting. I'm sort of exaggerating, but very animated. What seem like big disagreements, and then everybody's cool.
Yeah.
I wish it were more normal.
So maybe the mechanism of going from shouting to being cool again needs to improve. Because maybe we can't solve the shouting at each other.
Maybe not.
So maybe we need to somehow figure out the de-escalation, like making up. I've had a few recent fights with friends. Like
Really?
that. Yeah.
For
just-
politics.
No.
Oh.
No.
No.
But political style, emotionally drenched stuff, and it was interesting to go through that full process and then make up at the end. But it was a process, and it was a process that required being in person,
Right.
and talking through it, and it was stressful, the whole thing. And then maybe because most of our interactions are online, we don't get a chance to do that in person, making up again. I don't know, but do you think it's a feature or a bug of the system that we just
think it's a
hate
feature. Well,
the powerful?
you mentioned the online. I think you mentioned it earlier perfectly, which is you take contentious political issues, you create a platform that rewards controversy and disagreement and limits the number of characters you can use to express yourself. You kind of throw it into a baking dish and mix the entire thing up. It's complete and total chaos. And one of the things that, I've talked before about all the angry emails and threats and stuff that I get. I'm acutely aware that if I had in-person conversations with most of these people, the conversations would basically be like, oh, we have different views about how to solve some of the problems we're facing. We probably agree about what the problem is, and we probably share many values, but on these particular 4 issues, we may have very different views. But that's okay. Online, that's not the case. And it leads to, the mess that we get ourselves in. But I think that it's a feature of a lot of the systems that are being used to disseminate information.
Again, let me linger on that. Do you regret some of the mockery and the snark you use on Twitter and even in your show that kind of feeds that division?
I don't regret it in the sense that it's a calculated part or tool that I use in addition to figuring out how to simplify complicated concepts and choosing stories that I think are underrepresented. And it's all part of like the package of what I'm doing. I recognize that my show is not the audio visual version of a peer-reviewed randomized controlled trial about views on abortion or whatever the case. Like, I'm very much aware of that, but I don't regret including it as a tool that I've used to build the community in sum total that I've built over the last more than 10 years.
I guess I could ask about the different trajectories you think your show might take. So, the dynamic you had with Donald Trump Jr. and Candace Owens is the more appropriate comparison. Are you okay having
Look,
that
it's a
dance
smoke signal.
for the next few years between you and Candace Owens, and just kind of the mockery, the derision that's a part of that process, and taking part in that?
I'm fine with it in the sense of personally, I tolerate it well. until it crosses the line and people pull my family in. And right, so that's the part that's...
If we set the family stuff aside,
If I set that aside...
just in the digital space, you're
I'm
okay with it?
glad to mix it up. Now, the truth is, Candace Owens has had me blocked for years up until this incident. I don't
She
know
unblocked
why.
you?
She unblocked me just to tweet about what I tweeted about. I don't know the backstory of that, genuinely. I have no idea. So I don't have a sense that she's super interested in engaging with me on that. But all of these people, I mean, Candace Owens is welcome on my show anytime. Don Jr. is welcome on my show anytime. It's been a decade since I had Ben Shapiro on. He's welcome at any time. I'm glad to have these conversations, and I think it's an important thing. And also, I wish that everybody was willing to have the conversations in good faith rather than as performance. It's not even really performance art. Rather than being simply for an audience that you have.
In terms of your motivations, do you worry about the effects of something you spoke about offline, like the YouTube algorithm? Are you driven by the number of views your videos get, or are you driven by something else?
So in my world, I guess I would say, the number of views that any platform generates is a metric that I can choose how to interpret. I can choose to interpret it as I've created content that's interesting to people, or I've created content that's really angering people, and that's why they're showing up, because they like it, it's because they're angry, or whatever else the case may be. But it is true that there are algorithmic changes that can take place. Something happened in early January that affected us on YouTube, or there are periods on TikTok where you can tell we're doing all the same things, something has happened, and then you never usually figure out what it is. So for me, it's sort of just like a general tool to see what is the level of interest in what I'm doing, and are the numbers so out of whack with what I would expect that I should look into whether something deeper is happening. Has there been some change to an algorithm, or whatever the case may be? I had a debate once with someone who accused me of using clickbait to generate views, and we had a really interesting conversation where I said, tell me really what you mean by that. Is your argument that I'm using titles that don't actually represent what's in the video? No, what's in the title is in the video. I go, okay, so it's not that the title is dishonest. Are you saying I'm deliberately picking titles that will garner a larger audience? And they said, yeah, that's kind of what I mean. And I said, isn't that kind of what we're all doing? The alternative would be choosing titles to generate a smaller audience, which seems like a real kind of waste of time. So I'm trying to navigate and play the game in a way that's comfortable.
I like
Use
my
the
honest
metrics
titles.
more as a tool than as something to obsess over.
Nevertheless, the metrics are what they are, in that they are able to affect your psyche. It's very difficult, which is why I have a Chrome extension that hides all the views and all that on YouTube for me. It's difficult not to let it affect how you think about ideas. So maybe your extensive exploration of a particular topic, like healthcare, generated very few views. It's difficult for you to still care about healthcare. There's some aspect of the human mind that starts being affected by those views, and I think that's a really dangerous thing. Mostly, it's probably beneficial, because it probably makes you a better presenter. If you do care about a topic a lot, you become more charismatic, you learn sort of in Jimmy, Mr. Beast way how to present the ideas better. But it also can affect which topics you choose to cover, what you choose to think about those topics, the audience capture of those topics. And that's a really scary effect. I'm really worried about my own mind in that. So I run from that aggressively.
One of the things that I include in my overall approach is I don't think about any one clip. I think about an entire show, or a week of shows, or a month of shows. And so it's less about, does any one clip do well? My view going in is, I'm going to do stuff that won't do that well, but I think it's really important to do, and I want to make it part of my show. And so when I did a clip with 10 ideas for reducing gun violence, I know that that's not going to get 500,000 or 1 million views. I know it's just not going to. And the first day it'll get 12,000, and I'll go, I don't care. That's fine. There's a group of people in my audience that values this stuff, and I want to keep doing this stuff. I'll end up surprised sometime, and 2 weeks later, it has 150,000 views because it started being shared. Great. But I don't go into it thinking these all need to be home runs by that metric. I always go in saying I want to put out a diversity of content, including stuff that is less titillating and salacious, but is important to do. It's more researched, etc. And so that's the way I try to resist exactly what you're doing.
And I think you have to probably know your stuff. Like for me, metrics, I just like numbers too much. For me, metrics do affect me. This is why I don't read this shit. Like I can't. I would love to hire somebody in the team who cares. Because we currently have folks, all of us just don't care. Because it probably is good to care enough to kind of just do good thumbnails and this kind of stuff to pay attention. But to me personally, I just find inner peace and focus if I don't think about the numbers at all. Because I find myself, I just remember a long time ago when I started a podcast, I would think that I failed if it didn't do well. Like if I didn't celebrate the person well enough, I didn't do a good job enough of a conversation. Well, that's not necessarily at all what that means. It's hard not to.
This is tough stuff. I mean, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, and part of it is, I mean, it starts in my. You have a little bit of a different situation than me because you're doing long form conversations with people, and the prep is a little bit different. One of the things in my space, because I'm reacting mostly to what's going on in the news, and then also picking topics to dive into it a little bit more deeply.
Bus.
Is I have very little control over the news cycle. And there is a meta metric or a macro metric that affects me that will quadruple my audience and then take 75% of it away, which is the seasonality of election cycles. Yeah. And the first few election cycles, it's very tough because I go, it's October. I'm like, at this rate, we're gonna have 20 million subscribers by next. These numbers are unbelievable. And then it's January 30th. The inauguration's over. The debate is about the debt ceiling, and nothing's going on. And I go, nobody's watching my content. I must have forgotten to upload like something must be wrong. It's completely beyond my control. So I think part of what you're saying is, I try to focus on the things I can control, and understand those that I really have no control over whatsoever, and try not to worry about them.
And try to do the things that make you happy at the end of the day. You mentioned RFK, the guy you met. What do you think about some of the other candidates outside of Joe Biden in the Democratic Party? RFK Jr. What do you think of him as a candidate?
I've met him. We once had dinner, and we have a number of friends in common, which is what makes this a little more awkward. But I think his campaign is basically sort of like a chaos candidacy to raise awareness and maybe raise money either for his book or his anti-vaccine organization, Children's Defense Fund, I believe it's called. I think there's some reporting that Steve Bannon really liked the idea of him running as a Democrat, again, to just generate chaos. I don't find it super interesting. I don't find it worthy of that much discussion. Smart guy, nice guy, has been doing anti-vaccine work that I don't find particularly inspiring.
So it's not just anti-COVID vaccine, it's more broader than that?
He's been in that space long before the COVID vaccines, yeah. Yeah, I don't find it super interesting.
Well, he also wrote the book, The Real Anthony Fauci. Is that the name of the book?
Did he write that? That's I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I'm aware of that book. I didn't know he wrote it.
I think I did, but it's been on my reading list to get. I've been trying to get a good, balanced reading list about the COVID pandemic to understand what the hell happened. And anytime I start to try to go to that place, I'm exhausted by it.
Well, it's interesting to me that you wouldn't wait longer before delving into those books to have maybe a more clear hindsight.
But I think this is a pretty good time. You don't think so? Like this is. It depends on your goals. If you're thinking of it as a historical event, yes, you should probably wait longer. But if you're thinking about like understanding what is broken about our system that we responded so poorly, that there was so much division. What is broken about our political system that it didn't unite us, it divided us? Who's to blame? There's probably a lot of different narratives. I feel like the more you learn about this, the better you can understand. I read, on just Vladimir Putin, I read like 5 biographies already, maybe more. just it helps to really understand the people involved, the organizations involved. I don't know, everything from the scientists to the political leaders. It felt like the blog posts and the tweets didn't quite catch
They
this
didn't
story.
quite have. No, one of the things I read a ton. I don't read any like modern political books, so I don't read the memoirs of elected officials. I don't read any. I just feel like I get enough of it in my job. So my reading list is
Yep.
just other
Fiction.
things. It's
Yep.
history, it's narrative nonfiction,
History.
economics, etc. And that's my bias because I'm so overloaded with a lot of the stuff you're talking about. I haven't read any of Obama's books. I didn't read John Bolton's book, or I don't read any of that stuff. Although I'm sure there is value to be gleaned from it.
What about the other candidate that, according to the subreddit, and as you mentioned, you've criticized it a little bit, Marianne Williamson? Do you think, what are the pros and cons of her as a candidate?
This is another area where many in my audience really are angry with me.
Yeah.
I don't find her candidacy super interesting. I'll tell you the pros and the cons as I see them. I do think that we have elected officials in the U.S., particularly presidents, from a really narrow range of backgrounds. So it's lawyers and sometimes business people, very, very often lawyers. I think we would benefit from a much greater diversity of backgrounds. And I once said, and that would include people from education, people from the science world, people with backgrounds maybe running nonprofits, etc. Now, Marianne Williamson did, I guess, at one point run some kind of small nonprofit, and some in my audience thought that credential alone would make me fall head over heels in love with the idea of a Marianne candidacy. I've interviewed for her. It's just not for me, is the way I like to say it. It's the background of the woo-woo type stuff is a bit off-putting to me. I understand that someone with literal Christian Bible beliefs that also I don't like, maybe I'm more willing to accept, as most of our presidents, of course, have had those views, because they're otherwise more qualified. But some of the things that she says just strike me as, I just don't know. I'll give you an example. When she was on with Russell Brand, she said there's no such thing as clinical depression. It just means someone in a clinic told you you have depression. I don't believe that to be the case. I think we have an understanding there's two types of depression. There's like a genetic predisposition depression. There's like a acute something's happening in my life, temporary depression. When she was asked about it recently, she said, I didn't mean it. I was just trying to impress Russell Brand. I don't know if I'm more bothered by the things she first said or by the fact that she wanted to impress Russell Brand, but it's just like, it's just really not for me. And I agree with her on we need to take the climate more seriously. We need to expand access to health. I'm with all of that stuff. Now, I want to say one other thing about this. Anybody who wants to run should run. I am not suggesting there should be an uncontested primary for Joe Biden. Absolutely.
So you think it should be contested?
Well, what I mean by contested is, so there's two parts to what we mean by contested. Will the DNC organize debates? And we'll get to that in a second. But should anybody who's on the left get out of the way because Joe Biden is president and he's running for re-election? Absolutely not. The question about should there be debates, I would like there to be debates. The DNC pretty clearly isn't going to organize them. I think if you did them, you would have to say at what polling level do you qualify? And I don't know exactly where you put that number, but I think it would be a great thing to put Joe Biden on a stage with, if you can get, 6%, 8%, I'm not really sure what the number would be. I'm totally all for that.
Why is this set of candidates, at least from my perspective, so weak? Do you have an understanding?
There's a lot of different answers to this. One aspect to this, which I think is more of a sociocultural thing, which I've recently read about to some degree, is the job actually turns off the people who would be best at it because of what you need to do to become president. And it includes all but completely abandoning your existing day-to-day life, job, which you may depend on, and family to some degree. It's horribly negative, as we already talked about. And at the end of all of that, you either lose and then have to rebuild, and maybe you're not in a position to be able to do that, or you win, and then now you've got 4 years of being one of the most hated people, no matter how good a job you do. So I think by its nature, it turns off a lot of people that would I also think that there's a lot of posturing from within the parties about, well, you might be good, but it's not your time yet, so you should wait, and then let's talk about maybe a Senate seat here and there. So it's like a company essentially, and they're figuring out where they want to place people. I think all of these things make it so we end up with candidates most people aren't super thrilled with.
So it's difficult for somebody who's young or an outsider to quickly become a candidate.
I think that that's true, and I think also, in a lot of ways, it's just not. I mean, would you want to be president?
No.
I mean, I can't be because I wasn't born in the U.S., so it's easy for me to say. But
If everyone says no, then we'll get the people that we have.
no, I understand.
So I would love to help somehow.
Sure.
And I feel like there's not even a mechanism for helping, except through the through the voting process. And I'm just annoyed how little technology there is in the whole process, how little innovation there is in the whole process, all of this.
The sad thing is, this is written about a lot, which is, there's this thing called political hobbyism, and I think there's a good chance that some of the people in my audience are political hobbyists in the sense that they follow this stuff as entertainment to some degree. And I've written a lot about how, I've read a lot and talked a lot about how, okay, we vote every 2 years or every 4 years in our local elections, etc. And then we think about politics all the time. Neil Postman wrote about this in his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. But what are you actually going to do about the kids starving in this country and the nuclear buildup in that country? It's okay. If everybody refocused their attention on their immediate communities, and that could mean any number, it could mean the town or city you live in, or it might mean an athletic club or whatever. If everybody, this time they spent on political hobbyism, they moved somewhere else, which might put me out of a job, that's okay. I'm willing to lose my job because I think it would be so beneficial. Then our communities would just be that much better.
No gun, of
because you can
course.
actually affect change in a much more tangible way.
Why would I get a gun?
Whether it's people talk about potholes, but other things as well.
Yeah, and I wish our system was more amenable to that kind of contribution. Hopefully through the digital space it would be. Let me ask you about, on the Republican side, Ron DeSantis. What do you think of him as a candidate running against Donald Trump?
I think in the couple of weeks before our discussion today, his campaign, which hasn't even started, has sort of started to implode. And this was something that I started thinking about in September, October. He really doesn't seem ready for prime time in the sense that just being confronted, and confronted's not even the right word, just being asked about some topics he didn't really seem to want to talk about, he responded in such a sort of disproportionate, unhinged way. During his recent trip to Asia, he was asked about why aren't you, or why are you responding but in this weird way to Trump's attacks on you? And he went into this weird bobblehead thing with a weird smile, and something came out that didn't make any sense, and he sort of got mad at the reporter. And it was just like, if you can't handle that, you can't be on a debate stage with Donald Trump. And again, for all my criticisms of Trump, the guy gets you on a debate stage, he can make you look silly. He was recently asked about his role at Guantanamo Bay when he was an officer in, I forget which branch of the armed forces, and he just sort of attacked the journalist asking the question, and it just looked very bad. And there are increasingly big Republican donors who are not fans of Trump and were sort of hoping to put their eggs in the Ron DeSantis basket, who are saying, this guy just doesn't have what it takes, I don't think he can do it. So I don't know if DeSantis will be able to get away. Once you're polling 20-something, like he is, and you haven't even announced, it's very attractive. And he probably, to some degree, is thinking, if I wait till 2028, I might not have this opportunity again. But Trump's polling 52, 53, which means even if DeSantis gets all of the current non-Trump votes, he has to figure out how to take something more from Trump. I just don't know how he does it.
First of all, the implosion aspect, that's part of the process, isn't it? You kind of implode a bunch of times.
And then rebuild yourself.
And rebuild, and because the news cycle kind of forgets.
It's possible. The problem is, the first debate is in August, so that's only a few months away, and the decision is going to have to be made pretty soon. And unless he can get a new momentum going, I just don't know how he gets what he needs in order to really have a shot.
So would anyone else run against Donald Trump?
It's very tough right now. I mean, there are other people running. There's this guy, Ramaswamy, who's running. Nikki Haley is running. Her campaign basically dead on arrival. Trump actually does better in polls the more people run. When it's just him and DeSantis, that's the best scenario for DeSantis. It's not great for DeSantis, but it's certainly better. But I think the difficulty is, this is a question for Republicans to figure out. The people who rightly recognized in 2016 that this guy is not good for their party, still believe this guy is not good for their party. But many of them recognize that most of the voters are still behind him. You can always say, it's early, his polling doesn't really mean anything, anything could happen. Something major would have to happen for Trump to lose that lead. If he got more, if he was arrested 2 more times and had more indictments, and it just became like, this guy can't even campaign because he's so busy going from court to court, maybe that would make a difference. It's really tough to imagine.
You said that there are 3 categories of people who vote Republican, and that Trump introduced the 4th one. Can you go through the 4 categories?
Sure. So you've got like your pro-business, low-tax Republicans. These are mostly people like Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney has a bit of the social conservatism as well. He's Mormon, and that's there. But Mitt Romney primarily, particularly as a Northeast sort of Republican, I mean, I know Utah, but governor of Massachusetts, he is like a low-tax pro-business type guy. You've got your libertarian type Republicans who are primarily about freedom and liberty. Often they are actually more socially liberal, where they're like, I don't care about gay marriage, liberal, I don't care so much about abortion, and that overlapped a little bit with the Tea Party movement in 2010, although Tea Party did have a religious component, but sort of like the libertarian, freedom-minded folks, and then the religious conservatives, people that support candidates like Josh Hawley or Ted Cruz, etc., where their big thing are social issues. Often they actually want Christianity being civil government. They don't want separation of church and state. Those are traditionally the 3 Republican groups. The one that Trump introduced was people who just didn't really pay attention to politics, but either followed celebrity or had grievances that they didn't yet have a scapegoat for, and were sort of right-leaning culturally, even though they didn't attribute that to republicanism. And Trump was able to bring them into politics, often for the first time as voters. They could be part of any of those 3 groups if they get more into politics or kind of be their own thing, but they're more kind of like cult of personality, I'm here for Trump types.
Did it have to do anything about the culture wars and the identity politics, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so in 2016 when Trump mobilized them, those weren't really issues the way they are now. So I think at that time it certainly was not a factor.
What was the mobilizing issue? Was it just anti-Hillary in 2016?
He did a good job on anti-Hillary, but a lot of it was identifying real economic problems, wage depression, lack of jobs in parts of the country, Ohio and Indiana. Trump rightly identified, like, we have an issue here, we don't have enough entrepreneurship, etc. But there was also a lot of scapegoating. That was, China and people coming through the U.S.-Mexico border were popular scapegoats for a lot of those problems. This gets us kind of to populism. Populism is a rhetoric, and populism as a rhetoric doesn't necessarily come with particular policies. You can be a populist, a user of populist rhetoric and propose solutions that would be more aligned with Bernie or Tucker Carlson. Populists will often identify the plight of the middle class. The difference would be Bernie will say, we've got to put some restrictions on how much billionaires can make, and we've got to reinvest in these social programs. Tucker will say, BLM taking your house and a brown person from Mexico taking your job are what we need to deal with. So the populist rhetoric can lend itself to very different policy, and Trump used that very effectively in 2016.
Why do you think Hillary Clinton was hated as intensely as she was by a certain percent of the population? It feels like that's the first election I witnessed where there's a lot of hate. Maybe I
CFR.
don't remember Obama. I don't remember the degree of hate. There was conspiracy theories that he wasn't born in this country, but I don't remember hate towards Obama.
Record death threats under Obama, more than any previous president.
Towards who? Towards him.
Towards Obama. Oh, People
do you mean
hated
more
Obama.
hate between voters or
between voters, but like that's I guess what I was speaking to, but that hate was directed towards um, the narrative, the thread that connected all of that in 2016 was Hillary Clinton.
few different things, and I'm not ranking these. These are just all things that come to mind. One is Hillary Clinton had been around in the political space for a long time, from her time as First Lady, through as Senator, Secretary of State, etc. So I think that there was enough time for different groups to develop an antipathy towards her for different reasons. So time. Secondly, Trump's branding of her as crooked was very effective, where there were so many people demanding that she be imprisoned.
I have
If you ask
2,400
them
metal
what is
frags
the
for
crime,
some
they don't
reason.
know. But she should definitely be locked up. That became a very big thing. The email story, as it were, and James Comey doing a second public event about that investigation, even though there wasn't any actual news about it, just doing a second event about it at the last minute, I think hurt her and also generated some hate. And I don't find Hillary Clinton to be particularly likable, although I voted for her. I thought she was the better candidate. And I think that there are others who also didn't find her particularly likable. Those are a lot of impediments to becoming president.
Well, I was trying to understand.
she was
why
kind of
there's
a
so many
cuck.
Conspiracy theories about
She,
Clinton.
like, it's funny. I'll say the word cuck about a woman, but I won't say it about a man, which is sexist.
Maybe I'm not researched well.
But she was kind of a
Of the
cuck.
why of it.
She totally
Well,
looked the
why
other
of it
way
is
while
she's
her husband
accepting
just
conspiracy
slept
theories.
around on
That
her.
was sort of
And I've never
conspiracy
respected
theories
that.
that
I've
killed
never
a lot of
respected that. End the relationship.
It's hard for
If
me to
you
speak to them
enable
because I'm
them,
aware
they'll
that
just
they
keep
exist,
acting
but I'm not an
up and
expert in them
catching
because they
STDs
seem
and
so
breaking
obviously
people's
baseless
lives and
to the degree that I've
you
researched them a
know,
little
and she
bit,
seemed
and
like a
then I moved
cuck,
on
and it just went from there. She
you know,
was a
it's been years
CFR
since I've looked
cuck.
at this stuff. I know
She
there's
was
the
a
Seth
power
Rich
figure.
one, and there's the Clinton
She was
body count one. I
CFR.
think there's one. Epstein,
Anytime you
if I
say
recall correctly,
CFR, my
there's all
trust
sorts of
goes to
different
zero.
ones.
I don't care who they are.
Without speaking to any of them
If they're
specifically, because I'm
CFR,
not
they're the
expert on
devil.
Clinton
I mean, they're
conspiracies.
Trilateral Commission.
It
They're the
does
I
seem
mean,
as
they're
though
the
this
people
stuff
who
for so
actually
long has
believe.
generated an audience. I mean, I remember
Her and her husband are the people who actually believe in Luciferian doctrine. And, I mean, I'm not going to go any crazier than that. One of them's a 48th level, it's not a Mason, but it's like a fucking Bilderberger, I think, or something. And he's an orphan, but he's a Rothschild. He's definitely a Rothschild. It's in his bloodline. And I mean, Clinton was weird, and so was she. And there was a lot of rumors about them being killers and taking lovers and murdering them and all this other stuff. And it was just weird. It was weird. I don't like either of them, frankly. He repealed Glass-Steagall Act, so I'm always going to hate him. Because the predatory lending thing fucked me my entire life. I never knew why predator lending was like the predator lending was so bad. It's because of Clinton and Glass-Steagall. It was terrible. I'm gonna get so many of these, and I'm just gonna load them. Yeah, give me give me how much scrap do I have now? 356. It wasn't good enough, damn it. Gotta keep going. Damn it. I have to go kill them. So that's a little bit of bullet mats that I didn't really want to do. You know, I believe I can freely upgrade this as well as that. Yep. What else? Yeah, that's good. It's a whole thing. I don't want you or you vulnerable or you. That's enough for now. Yep. Good shit. Farm all night if you fucking want. You know, have fun. I mean, I don't know. That's like another whole round of upgrades, and I definitely will. I definitely will. Yeah. Definitely make down here metal. I'm out now? Yeah, I'm out now. That's alright. Yeah, definitely keep going. This is kind of annoying. I'll have to pick this one up, but that's alright. I don't think I'll be able to get it back down, but that's alright. I was able to do it before. Maybe I can do it again. No. You really have to, like, make that happen if you want it to stay that way. It's alright. Yeah. It's all good. I'll just put it there for now or whatever, like right underneath the chest or whatever. Underneath there. But look, they finally fixed research benches. That's good. God damn it, the zombies are getting annoying. God damn it, you idiots are too loud. Did the zombies drown? I think the zombies drown now. I should have built out in the water more, but I didn't think I could. They did. Look, the zombies drown now. That's interesting. Yeah, why should they be able to go in the water forever? They should just drown. Yeah, what's that sound? Stupid wolf. Where are you, wolf? You're annoying. Stupid submarine wolf. But I like that the water kills the zombies. I think that's awesome. Yep. What else should I do? I should make like, yep, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more doors.